Hi, I'm Jim Jenner, and welcome to Secrets of Champions number 6. Wow, you can count on 2 hands the number of films in this series. This one is subtitled To Boldly Go, in honor of Star Trek's famous mantra to explore the unknown corners of the universe. People tell me they envy my job, traveling among the galaxy of stars that shine brightly on the pigeon racing world. Well, if you know anything about astronomy, you also know that the universe is expanding. The same can be said of our hobby. For example, this summer, 3 different lofts in England won major international races against the Europeans. 3. Also, German, British, and birds from unsung countries have recently won major one-loft contests on several continents. Now, these developments could be called astronomical. Does this mean the blinding glow of Belgian and Dutch lofts is actually the light of dying stars? Not necessarily. But it proves to me that the pigeon universe is indeed expanding and that we're entering an exciting new era of exploration for the winning bloodlines of the future. Last year in Secrets of Champions 5, we visited dozens of fanciers who weren't very well known outside their home countries. I was pleasantly surprised how popular these short visits proved to be. But it was my side trip to Poland in the same film that sparked comments from numerous viewers that their country or region also deserved attention, at least more than was being given by the commercial pigeon press. That got me to thinking. If there are galaxies out there with undiscovered stars, it's much easier to explore them now than it ever was. So I thought, why not boldly go out there? Why not take a passport, buy a few airplane tickets, and rent a car or 2 in the hinterland? Maybe I could prove there were indeed stars in those distant galaxies. More important, maybe I could show you, using my undying confidence in the new travel technology of satellite navigation, that this exploring stuff isn't so hard to do. Anyway, that's the genesis for the film you're about to see. So what are the names of these unexplored galaxies? Deutschland, Germany, Wallonia, which is the French-speaking region of Belgium, Wales, and the Irish Republic. There you will meet a couple dozen warm and wonderful aliens who may not all speak our language, but who clearly speak the internationally understood dialect of winning pigeon races. So fasten your seatbelt as we prepare to go to Warp Drive from Montana to the continent and Germany. Our first stop on Secrets of Champions 6, To Boldly Go. To get to Germany, I decided to fly into the Netherlands and drive from there. And if that sounds tedious, slowly driving from country to country, instead of taking an airplane, please remember I live in Montana. We drive a long way between towns, and we're not even the biggest state, we're only the 4th largest. But Montana is still bigger than Germany. And Deutschland has a way of flying at a very low altitude, the Autobahn. A satellite navigator and a full tank of gas can get you just about anywhere in Europe as fast as today's grueling process of air travel. At an airport, the wires, cables, and batteries we carry as a video crew always get us hassled by security, so to not have to worry about all that more than makes up for a little more windshield time. Germany in June is beautiful, even at 100 miles an hour, and that's a leisurely pace on this famous freeway that doesn't really have a speed limit. Within a few hours, we were deep into Germany an hour south of Bonn, traveling through lush fields and along winding country roads. The low hills we passed are actually the remnants of ancient volcanoes. Our destination was the quiet village of Ettringen, to meet with Dr. Hans-Peter Brokamp. It's appropriate that this friendly scientist appears first on this film. He's doubly famous in the pigeon universe. First, in partnership with his father, Hans-Peter created one of the strongest long-distance families, not only in Germany, but in Europe. In November of 2010, when his father retired from active racing, they auctioned off the bulk of their birds on the internet, on Pipa. 200 Brokamp pigeons brought a world record $1.6 million, including a record-breaking $250,000 for a single bird, Euro Diamond, a long-distance ace and fantastic stud, now breeding in Japan. The good doctor's second claim to fame is for his research and development of a new form of pigeon health products, probiotics, which are a timely and vital countermeasure to our hobby's disastrous overuse of antibiotics. I think he should be famous for one more thing, his choice of a new racing partner. Why was he your favorite?
Because he's very nice from his color.
His color?
And his eyes is glass
The
eyes.
very bright.
How about his personality?
We are married. He's my man.
Dr. Brokamp moved near Etrigan to compete alongside Britta Drexler, who flew successfully for years with her late father, Manfred. Good looks aside, Britta is one of the top women fanciers in Germany, and she proudly showed us some of her father and her favorite birds. When you look at these lofts, it's not exactly what you'd expect for the man who bred and raced the world's most expensive pigeons. But Hans-Peter respected the simplicity of the operation Britta had with her father here, and they've maintained it without many changes. And given the incredible racing seasons they've had here, you'll want to pay attention to how well this frugal operation seems to function. The various lofts are sandwiched into a modest backyard with several large trees. Next door, a neighbor has a huge ham radio antenna. On the far left are stock lofts in a corner where the mates of the race team are kept. Then a section for widowhood hens, a large one for widowhood cocks, another tiny breeding pen, and finally a young bird section. The roof is aging semi-transparent fiberglass, and the trapping system is pushing 30. They've been retrofitted with ETS pads underneath. Probably the newest element are the translucent panels that cover the wire fronts of the racing lofts.
If it's very sunny, it's open. Then if the wind is from the front, or if it's too cold or over days, we take it like that, though that we have also air inside. And in the winter time, or if the weather is extremely bad, we can close it completely. And that is a very easy system too.
There's very little in the way of German gadgets here, such as automatic cleaning. Here, the cleaning lady comes by twice a day and not only gets the job done, but talks to just about every bird in the process. The race teams were being prepared for a 400-kilometer race in very hot weather when we visited. Hans-Peter showed us his widowhood hens, who remain in their boxes unless they're out for their 1-hour morning or evening exercise. He likes the aging and simple nest system.
Yeah, alles gut, alles gut. So it's good. So they're closed. If you open it, you can do that like that. And with the peanuts, they are inside. Very easy. So I need also a very simple box. All the complicated boxes they are selling for motivation or whatever nonsense. Yeah, I need a very simple box to do that.
He explained the cocks and hens see their mates for differing times prior to basketing.
One difference is that we have the nest bowl in the box on the cock side, but we take it out here from the nests with the hens because they are sitting all the day there. So we set it, tomorrow is basketing day, we set the bowl inside, take the wood outside, and then the cocks are coming together with the hens for minimum 3 hours. The cocks who are raised, we show to the hens in maximum 30 to 45 minutes. But also not too short, but not as long as the hens. They get the partner for minimum 3 hours. And then they're totally quiet, they come to the basket, laying down and very relaxed. Perfect.
The widowhood cocks spend most of their days on their big wooden block. They exercise twice a day too, for 1 hour. And they look forward to nothing more than a peanut or two from Britta. Hans-Peter told us about this pigeon, the priest, who didn't even need a hen.
The one who is laying on the wood, he never takes any hen. He never is looking for a cock or nothing. He is only racing for a peanut. Yeah, I never had it before, and it's unbelievable. That cock raced 2 years ago in our federation from 13 races, 13 prizes. He was the best cock in the federation. Without any hen, without anything. Only coming for his wood and for a peanut.
Over the years, German pigeon trainers have earned a reputation for overusing antibiotics, so it's ironic that one of Deutschland's greatest living fanciers, who just happens to have a PhD in biochemistry, has become the leading advocate for another type of biotics, probiotics.
So I like the probiotics not only in pigeon sport but in average, compared to the use of antibiotics, most, because it's a very elegant system to have the pigeons in a good health. The antibiotics are killing everything, the good bacteria and also the bad bacteria they have to kill, but they kill nearly the total immune system.
Dr. Brokamp explained the differences between prebiotics and probiotics.
A probiotic is nothing else than a nutrition, but in that nutrition are alive bacteria. Yeah, there's a difference between probiotic and prebiotic. Prebiotic are only things like sugars or something around, which make sure that the bacteria are able to grow. But if you are talking about a probiotic, that product has a live bacteria inside. That is very important.
Now remember, only certain strains of bacteria can survive and thrive in a pigeon's intestines. Years ago, while working in a large pharmaceutical company's lab, he was able to conduct research no one had done before on these rare, pigeon-friendly strains.
But I said, let me test that bacteria if I feed it and find it back in the intestine. And from 50 we find back 3, which settled. That is the most important thing, that if you give a bacteria inside, that it settles in the intestine.
It stays there.
It stays there.
The initial success of his probiotic powders has led to a line of natural products intended to improve pigeon health and race performance. While his Probac is not available everywhere, Hans Peter's efforts have spawned other companies now promoting these types of pigeon additives that are probably available in your area. Hans Peter uses all of his own concoctions with his own race team, but not at all times.
But I add it only until 12 o'clock. After 12 they get pure water to be sure that they drink enough. But that is not a problem in the water, they like it very much. It has a good smell, it has a good taste, and no problem.
The birds in the stock loft are allowed to fly out. We looked at Foxy, a double ace pigeon with the telltale brown feathering of his Muleman origins, a fancier Britta's father admired very much. This is the old Drexel line, and Hans Peter believes you need to outcross every decade, even in an established family. When you talk to this Olympiad champion, you realize there was at least one country that never doubted the quality of pigeons in Deutschland: Germany herself.
Perhaps it was a surprise for the world, but I'm sure it's not a big surprise for the fanciers here, because we know how we are racing for a long time. Every week our pigeons in the race, the special ace pigeon competition, which makes sure that the pigeon is not winning only one first prize or one early prize. They have to make prizes the whole season. If they miss one race, they are out. If they don't make a prize from 400, 500 or 600 kilometers, they are out. And that makes it strong and fast. The original of the strains is coming from Belgium and Netherlands and whatever. But the fanciers here are working with their own pigeons, and they have to select it under their conditions. And that makes it, at the end, stronger.
Hans Peter says he and his father decided to sell out through the internet for the simple convenience of maintaining their privacy. He admits he was surprised by the huge sums Brokamp pigeons sold for. But even though he's currently the brightest star in the commercial pigeon universe, he strongly supports the concept of exploring for undiscovered stars, especially if all you want to do is win races.
I know a lot of pigeon fanciers, not only in Germany, which are racing very well for years. They won the championships, they won first prize, everything, and they can't sell any bird because nobody's asking for. And perhaps they would be proud to give one away if somebody would ask them. Yeah, so perhaps it's a little bit a mistake or pity, I don't know what, that all the fanciers are looking for the same names who are making the big marketings. It has a little bit to do with the marketing. but to be successful is possible with no-name birds. The only thing is, if you are winning with a no-name bird, then you can't sell it, or you can't sell the youngsters. So if you want to sell birds, you need the names. But if you want to make good results, you don't need any names. That I'm absolutely sure.
I said at the beginning, Hans Peter is doubly famous for the record-breaking Brokamp sale and his introduction of probiotics. But I think he's happiest of all in his choice of a new racing partner. Britta is much more than a pretty face. She has a lifelong love of the birds that's obvious from the first time you meet her.
Good professional results.
She showed us how her beloved young birds, who are not darkened and only race for training in their first year, are treated to music. She joked with me that as kind-hearted as she was, her father was even more gentle. Too kind to be a pigeon racer, she said. No pigeon is ever killed here. Birds that don't make the cut are donated to fanciers in other countries, such as Poland. Hans Peter shared the story of a stray that came here that ended up siring an ace pigeon.
As we had a mealy cock from Netherlands with not a broken wing but a very hard-wounded wing, and he was not able to fly back, sitting here in the garden, and we gave him some food and everything. We made a telephone call to the owner, and he was not interested to get the bird back because he can't do anything with it. And we decided, okay, yeah, we don't kill any birds here. So we decided to set it in the little loft there, over there, give him a free hen to breed us some youngsters. No, we were not planning to have his bloodline, for sure not. We only want to use him so that he is not sitting for nothing there. Yeah, so we only want to use him to change some eggs and to breed them for us. And as the hen from him laid the eggs, we had no breeding pair in our lofts where we can change the eggs. So the eggs were laying there and they breed them up. One was not okay, and so we got only one youngster from it, a mealy hen later on. And that mealy hen raised not only a first prize from a very hard for 60 kilometers, it was a later ace hen from our federation here.
Dr. Brokamp says he brought a new level of discipline to the management of the old lofts, but as birds like the priest prove, they may be racing for love of Britta and her peanuts. I thought this was a great place to start this film. I hope you see the irony here, with a German fancier whose pigeons proved more valuable than any Dutch or Belgian bird ever was, but who also helped chart a course to steer our hobby away from the disastrous overuse of antibiotics. Yes, the times, they are a-changin'. Dr. Hans Peter Brokamp and Britta Drexler. If you win a big international race in Europe, the countries you beat will always say the wind was in your favor. And there's usually little truth to that. The weather is a wild card in our hobby more than any other sport on earth. But what if you breed a baby pigeon, put a band on it, and ship it halfway around the world to race in the same loft as thousands of other pigeons? If that bird and its nestmates fly faster than the birds of other countries, how do they explain that? The success of birds with German DV bands in one loft racing over the last few decades has been very difficult for pigeon pundits to get their heads around. Like the Brokamp's rise on the international stage, this man has done as much as any to improve the image of German pigeons. Meet Alfons Klaas. If you heard about the German victory in the 2007 South African race, here's your man. If you heard that the pigeon that won for a South African fancier named Kitchenbrand was bred by somebody else, he's your man again. Whatever rumors you heard about the Germans sending older pigeons, steroid-laden pigeons, or some other form of mad scientist-manipulated bird to win South Africa, you can forget it. They sent better pigeons.
These are sisters to the winners from last year, from Victory, from South Africa.
The Klaus family live in Reitberg in south-central Germany, and from what we saw, it's taken them about 30 years to be an overnight success in the pigeon game. I can tell you one thing about Alfons Klaas. Winning several big international races has not gone to his head.
I have a winning in China, first prize, 2 in South Africa, and 1 in World Ace in America.
He's not quit his day job. Neither is his dad or the rest of the family, who runs several businesses in Wrightburg. They have a restaurant, but their main business is a large meat packing plant that's been in the family for 3 generations. We drove there with Alphonse because for 2 of those generations, there's been a large pigeon loft above the factory. The uncle, whom Alphonse is named after, was a top fancier from this location, and so was his brother, Helmut, who raced successfully with young Alphonse as Klaus and Son. Both Alphonse and his dad work 6 days a week. The Klaus brand is famous throughout Germany for their pork products. They process 25,000 pounds of meat a week into every kind of sausage, bratwurst, hot dog, and ham you can think of. They employ dozens of people, and the entire operation is a model of hygiene and efficiency. Alphonse's uncle managed the factory until he died, and enjoyed being able to take a break with his pigeons in the loft above the factory. His nephew does the same, and this is the location where he keeps his main breeders. The second-story loft is old but bright and well ventilated, and the hard-working Klauses have employed the same loft man for decades to handle basic chores here and at their pigeon lofts at home. Alphonse is in constant motion. At 46, he's a bundle of energy, and even a heart operation recently couldn't slow him down. He rattled off pedigrees and pigeon details as we moved from the main breeding sections into the individual pens where he keeps his best pairs. If you notice anything right away about Klaus pigeons, they are full of fight. I'd say pugnacious. Now, many of the youngsters we saw were destined to go to the Sun City race. Alphonse said he's sending 60 birds, 20 to race in his name and 40 to again race for Mr. Kitchenbrand. And he has definite opinions of what not to send to that hard, hot African race.
White pants not good for South Africa. White pants and red pigeon I don't send to Sun City.
If you want to know how old these birds will be in the Big One Loft race, you can figure it out for yourself when you know we visited here in mid-June. So what is he doing to prep these pigeons for a race in another hemisphere? He darkens them to ensure their molt will be in sync with the seasons in South Africa.
This is the next sending to South Africa. This is a hog for it. And now you look. All is dark.
Much of what Alphonse believes is based on his own observations in Africa after the race. He's been there, and he's drawn a lot of conclusions from the lack of white feathers and general molting condition of the top 10 birds in the race. Based on his 2-time victory, there's obviously something to it. Now, if you're looking for secrets and magic potions, I didn't see them. It certainly appears that the German pigeons that have done exceptionally well against the birds of more famous nations were born in a 50-year-old loft and were the children of birds with a legacy of German racing behind them. Add in rigorous selection by a second-generation fancier, and you have the Klaus story. Well, half of the Klaus story, because for this family, racing to their own lofts is as big a thrill as winning distant one-loft races. The Klaus bloodlines do well for a lot of fanciers, including Alphonse's cousin Harry, who we had a chance to visit. The 2 men regularly exchange birds and advice, and Harry's young son could easily be the 3rd generation in this German racing dynasty. Alphonse and his father share both a home and a backyard full of pigeon lofts. In typical German fashion, Father Helmut lives on the ground floor, and Alphonse, his wife, and 2 boys live above him. As I said, the winning has been going on here for many decades. In the 70s and 80s, Helmut and Uncle Alphonse were scoring ace pigeon awards in one of the toughest clubs in Germany. There are almost 1,000 pigeon lofts within a 50-kilometer radius of this location, and regional races involve 20 to 40,000 birds. And remember, an ace pigeon here has to be nominated and score in the top third virtually all season.
10 prizes from 13 races, and you must be, it's very important that the pigeon comes early.
Alphonse believes his pigeons are tougher simply because they come from generations of birds that have worked 13 races a year, year after year. Today's Klaus pigeon's roots go deep into German racing. In 1988, when Alphonse was 23, he and his father bought an entire round of youngsters and eggs, 120 or so, from another German fancier, Rudi Korner. The combined families, with an occasional outcross, form the Klaus pigeons today. So we are not looking at Dutch or Belgian retreads flying for Germany. A young bird loft is attached to the main racing loft, and lest you think Alphonse ships all his best to South Africa, you need to know the family is very serious about young bird flying here in Germany. Their results here are also stunning. In many races they've taken the first 10 positions or more. The lofts are typically spotless, spacious German operations. Helmut and Alphonse now race roundabout. Alphonse is very happy with the performance of his hens.
Very good racing now. 80% from the hens now. 80%. Very, very good this year.
And you think it's these new perches and this new...
Yes, I do it this year because last year they go with 2 birds. Yes, and now only 1 bird can sit. I see it by another man. Yes, and there also they can sit but not see.
We stayed to watch birds come back from a hard, hot race, the hottest of the year. Helmut arrived home from work, taking off his coat after 6 straight days at the factory. And as we watched the older Klaus and his son wait impatiently for birds with their manager and a few friends, I thought of how this was a rare break for these two. For all their success, their big winnings, and chances to sell birds for big money, nothing has changed these 2 men. They still devote themselves to their family business with as much intensity as ever. And they, and their pigeons, are going to beat you on the international stage because of something similar between these men and their birds. Hard work. They expect it of themselves, and they expect it from their pigeons. That's obviously their road to success. Period. Helmut and Alphonse Klaus, Wrightbird, Germany. It's about a 200-mile journey from the village of Wrightbird to our next destination, and of course I put total faith in our satellite navigating system. This was to prove interesting. We are on our way to a town called Garnburg, where I hope to hook up with a young fancier named Martin Steffel. When we spoke on the phone, he said he'd be at his pigeon club at about the time we arrived, so we put in the coordinates for the clubhouse. After an hour or so, the GPS unit told us to exit the Autobahn and head out into the countryside, and I mean countryside. We wound through forests and villages and even got stopped by a herd of sheep. And when the sat-nav swore we were almost there, we were in the middle of nowhere. We are in the middle of, we're not only nowhere, we are on unnamed
After
road.
300 yards, turn right.
Unnamed road. We assume we're still in Germany, but we could be wrong. Then, just around the bend, hiding in a farmer's barn, was the Pigeon Club. Oh man, it is here! Unbelievable! I don't believe it! Needless to say, we were happy to see it. This is the Pigeon Club in absolutely the middle of nowhere, Germany. If this is... Martin is a very bright young guy who flies in partnership with his father, Franz. And while it may be in an old barn, the club is a Germanly efficient operation with about 60 members. It's the northernmost club in District 700, one of Germany's 69 racing districts. And District 700 typically ships about 5,000 pigeons per race. When we arrived, they were calculating that day's race and preparing their crates for the following week. These sturdy aluminum containers, with a clear plastic door and removable corrugated cardboard floor, are standard fare now here in Germany. The club is a nice mix of younger members and old veterans, and they studied the results of a tough race through 80-degree summer temperatures. After we left the clubhouse, we followed Martin to the hotel he'd booked for us, had a get-acquainted dinner, and the next morning drove to the Steffel Lofts. Martin and his wife live in a home next to his parents, and he and his dad share chores with the pigeons. At one time, Franz had birds in his attic, but they've since bought the vacant lot next door and built a beautiful loft for their old birds. To describe these two as passionate pigeon men is a major understatement. They love everything about racing, and they're very good at it. It's fair to say they're the best loft in the region. But rather than get into pedigrees and race results, let's take a look at their lofts and then hear some interesting ideas on young bird lighting and how they rate their breeders. Pigeon keeping here is a family affair. Franz's wife Heidi has a white bird release business, and Grandma Steffel is always around to keep everyone in line. Their newest old bird racing loft is a large single story with the hens on the right and cocks on the left. They spent months debating a lot of the features that went in here. Martin's day job is in data processing, so via the internet, he's done a great deal to make friends around the world for German racing. Franz is also in computers and owns a large service company. So this father and son partnership have the financial resources to try just about every new idea they think has merit. Martin demonstrated the flexibility of the beautiful German nest fronts they use. A little more complex than Dr. Brokamp's for sure.
This is a darkening box here, so it's dark here. So I can put here a nest, and then I close. Then I open this, and the cock can go in this. So when the nest is there, they do a nest here when they are paired. And I normally last year I had all this open all the week, so the cock can also go during the week in the nest. But there are always some very intelligent boys who hidden here and don't go to loft flying. So man, there is one. Oh, there's another. So I close it up now.
Okay.
This is in winter.
And
So
the same on the other side?
no, this is only
Just closed.
just closed.
So that's winter.
That's winter, yeah.
Okay, then in breeding it comes forward.
Yeah, and also in racing season.
In racing, and they have a dark box
And
in
you
there.
can, for when I have a hen home, maybe for the cock, you can put it here and make here the peep show.
And then he can see.
Yeah. He can see the hen then.
The aviary in front is relatively new, and they built it to create a place for the birds during the day, but also as a way to capture warm, dry air to flow into the nest sections of the building.
So we made the same system now. We put there the aviary, and when there is northeast wind, we can. So in night, this is closed. It's closed up, and we can use this the same way than the hen's loft. So there is air coming from the aviary in the loft in the night.
I asked Martin what was his favorite gadget.
And this is the best German engineer.
Yes, there goes.
Well, this is saving a lot of time.
Your droppings look very good.
Yeah, baby.
Their traps use new angled bobs over the ETS pad. They strongly believe fanciers don't pay enough attention to their birds' senses, such as smell. Franz religiously uses anise oil in his baskets and in the loft. He also sprays organic oil nightly in the loft. They designed the Old Bird Racing Loft to be as efficient as possible. They used green shade cloth on the aviary for ventilation and designed graded floors to permit droppings to land in long metal trays that can be easily cleaned. Every step they take is open to a lively debate between father and son.
Clean loft in winter in 12 minutes. Once a week.
Wow. 12 minutes.
Easy.
We bet.
Yes,
Jim, we bet.
I think you
we
need
bet.
20, more than 20 minutes.
I said, the half.
Yeah, he win.
They also like gadgets. For example, they have a hawk deterrent to chase away raptors. They get lots of them in the lush river valley where they live. But Franz also swears landmarks and lights help returning pigeons. He described when construction cranes were building a house next door.
They're standing. I think, oh my God, the whole season is over. There are two big cranes, here and here. It was the best seasons I had. They saw the cranes from each kilometers far away, and there's a significant point. So they saw.
So when they see the light is blinking, yeah, and or when the crane, or for example, if we toss our birds, we go 60 kilometers down the Autobahn or the highway, and we release them on the stadium of Hoffenheim. It's a big football stadium. So they have to pass, when they come from the race, they have to pass this stadium, and they know, I know that stadium, now I have to turn left. Yeah. Pigeons are seeing, pigeons are smelling, and nobody's care about it.
They also believe the magnetic fields caused by the flow of water through underground springs can affect homing pigeons, a common theory here in Germany. so they have magnets around their old bird loft. It's ironic that there's so much efficiency built into the old bird loft, and yet you have to be half monkey to get into the upper section of their young bird loft. They like to have their birds on the upper level, but access is a challenge. Martin says he's fallen off the ladder twice. The Steffels have had wonderful results with their old birds, but they're almost untouchable with the youngsters. And I have to give them credit for dreaming up what seems to me is the simplest young bird lighting system I've ever heard.
Yeah. Okay, when the young birds will be weaned in the end of March, they come here. So we keep them normal until 21st of June. And then on the 21st of June, we start simulating the longest day of the year. And the longest day of the year is from 6 till 22:30 or 10:30 p.m. So I have this automatic dimming system and I switch on the light. I say, okay, I want to have a sunrise from 6 till 9. Then we have the normal daylight. I don't have to light them to save energy. And again, from 6 p.m. to 22:30 or 23 or 11 p.m. then. Another positive is the air, that the ventilation in the loft is not disturbed. And you don't, it's better for breathing. And I made the experience when the young birds are lighted, they are better in the year after and when they are old birds. When they darkened, we darkened ourselves 3 years, 99, 2000, 2001. But I cannot remember a top bird who was darkened before. The most important is that the pigeons stop with molting. Not only the flights, also the feathers in the head and the cover feathers, they stop everything. That's the most important. So this is the second round. They will do 4 or 5, and the first round they will have thrown 6 or 7 pens until we start the light system. 80% are stopping with the molting of the flights, of the pens, 20% not. But the most important is that 100% are stopping with the body molting.
They firmly believe light is much better than darkening for young birds, but they were also eager to share a system they've used for over a decade to rate their breeders. We sat down in the garden and they talked about the points they look for in each bird before they select an appropriate mate.
What we look in a good pigeon, we look first, is the pigeon, has it an aerodynamic body, the muscles and the body length, so the form. Then for breeding, it's very important the eye for us. For racing, an eye has nothing to say, because a pigeon with a bad eye can race top, but you do hard to breed from a well. Luckily, Gomez has both, so I hope we do well with him in breeding. The next is the color of the feathers under the wing. There are 2 types of pigeons. One with the white feathers and one with the gray feathers.
Gomez has gray feathers
under the wing.
If we pair Gomez with a hen also with gray underfeathers like this, we never bred any bird which make a first prize or which scored 10 times in a row. It's not possible, because I don't know why, but it is. I tasted it years. I bred 100 and 1,000 birds to test it. If you couple 2 dark underfeathers, the pigeons begin to be small. So the back is too small. If the back is too small, he has no chance with a tail. Look here, he doesn't do the tail down, but he has the tail right. If the tail comes up, and if you couple dark with dark, the tail will come up.
Why we look for the tail down? It is a physical element, because when the pigeon is flying like this and the tail is down, it can put the feet better under the tail. When the tail, for example, is up and there is no elastic back, the feet are somewhere else. But this makes a pigeon tired. So this kind of pigeon with a tail, with a
a tail straight away or if a tail down has the much better possibility to fly physical better in the air.
A pigeon with dark feathers under the wing have automatically a smaller back. So that's why to couple always white feathers with gray feathers.
And very important, I think, is to know these dark feathers under the wings are dominant.
The third thing is the tail itself. The tail is separated in a smaller part and in a bigger part. You can see here. You have the upper feather of the tail. You have here a part which is a little bit bigger and a part that's a little bit smaller. And you have to pay attention that you pair a bird with gommas, where is the right part a little bit bigger. So this part is bigger, some millimeters bigger than the left part, with a hen, for example, with a bigger left tail. But for this you have to judge the upper feather of the tail. The next factor is the color of the pigeon and the vitality of the feathers.
Pigmentation.
The pigmentation. So Gomez, for example, has the blue bar here until the wing. The most blue bar birds don't have this. They stop here maybe, but he can be paired on blue. But normally we couple every blue bird with a checker bird.
Pigeon's number, the year, the eye color eye or a pearl eye.
Of course, Martin has all this in his computer. I don't normally like to present these kinds of complex theories, and one with this many moving parts is hard to summarize. But I respect these guys, so I'll give it a try. The basis includes selecting opposite eye colors, opposite tail feather dominance, opposite underwing colors, and opposite overall plumage. That's the basis. Martin is easy to find on the internet if you want to learn more. But here's an example of how they go about choosing mates with this system.
Her tail is a right tail, and the tail is going straight away, not down. So her feathers under the wing are white. She's a blue one and has a pearl eye. So with that hen, you have to pair a cock, a checker, with a left tail, where the part of the left is bigger, with gray feathers under the wing, and a yellow eye, and maybe a little bit longer than she is.
The rating system they follow only works if the birds in it have first proven themselves on the road.
Yes, if I say you have to couple always the opposite, but you know, it makes no sense to bred from a bird where the grandfather from the grandfather was the last one which has scored in a championship. You always have to select with the basket. You must take the bird in the basket that they fly, they must score on the flight, and then with these birds, with these 5 facts, you have to breed, and then in the future you will stand on the championship very, very high. I'm sure we do so.
Like other German pigeon fanciers, their passion is for each bird to win a prize every time it races. And birds are expected to work every week. And if you think some of their theories about smell, blinking lights, or tail feathers are a little out there, you have to respect the fact they never stop thinking about ways to do things better and win more races. You would not want to be competing against them. For example, how does their light system work? Martin sent me a race result, his favorite this year, where they took the first 35 positions out of 800 pigeons from 19 lofts. I'd say their breeding concepts and this easy light system might just be worth thinking about. Wouldn't you? Martin and Franz Steffel, Garnberg. I have to give credit to my friend Chris Sutton for connecting me with young Mr. Steffel and the next pigeon scribe you're about to meet. Originally, Chris was to be part of this enterprise, but a family commitment changed those plans. He also stayed home to win a national race, but that's another story. Suffice it to say that when I asked friends where I should boldly go, Chris's Facebook buddies proved to be just what I was looking for. Friendly, well-connected in their region, respected by fellow fanciers, and most important to me, with no hidden commercial agenda. That perfectly describes Jean-Jacques Deneau, who I asked to recommend fanciers in the region around Charleroi, heart of French-speaking Belgium. Wallonia is the southern region of Belgium that accounts for over half of the landmass, but less than a third of the population. And while this is a pigeon program, not a geography lesson, you need to know that the Flemish-speaking fanciers in the north have always seemed more adept at outshining their southern cousins. I'm not saying the stars in the northern sky aren't bright, but sophisticated international cities like Antwerp tend to outshine and outmarket more industrial locales like the coal country that surrounds Charleroi. JJ was our guide to this region. He wrote me that remembering English would take him a little time, but I countered that my high school French was long forgotten. And for those loft visits when JJ was trapped at work, well, the pigeon conversations were reduced to hand signals. So you won't hear a lot of interviews coming up in this section, but you will walk inside with me as I try to share how they do things in Wallonia, an area with every bit as much pigeon passion and history as the more famous fanciers of Flanders. It took us a little while to get to Wallonia after we visited the Steffels. We took time to visit the Pigeon Museum in Nuremberg and then drove through torrential downpours into northern France. There, I wanted to visit the new memorial erected to homing pigeon Cher Ami and the Lost Battalion. This is for another film project I'm working on, but it was encouraging to see this recognition, which was dedicated a couple years ago. It's very moving to visit this part of Europe, where so many have died in wars here. Much of this beautiful countryside has seen centuries of neighbor killing neighbor. I find it ironic that you drive from one country to another, and the barriers at the border, where officials would check papers and used to rifle through your belongings, they're no more. And the buildings at the border are literally derelict. You can now blast from one European country to another at about 100 miles an hour. And the EU may be having problems balancing an economy made up of so many countries and cultures, but the dream of a peaceful united Europe is an encouraging thing to witness. Other than some rough weather, we arrived in Charleroi in the early evening, had dinner with JJ, and mapped out our schedule of visits with the fanciers in the area. Sometimes we would follow Jean-Jacques in his car, and other times he rode with us, and it all depended on his work and family schedule. He owns and manages his own company, and what little spare time he has, he races pigeons and maintains the Star Pigeon website, which is very popular with the French-speaking pigeon folks in Belgium. Our first destination was the home of Stéphane Depassé. I should say the new home because he recently moved here with his young family and moved his race birds from a loft at his parents' home nearby. Stéphane is only 34, and he flies in partnership with a well-known Dutch long-distance expert, Joe Lardenoy. Although Joe lives more than 100 miles away, Stefan invited him to be his partner when Joe decided to retire from active racing, and Stefan was using his birds as a foundation family. The elder fancier's advice and the young man's energy have proved a potent combination. And although Stefan is the new generation of pigeon men, he's very much dedicated to long-distance racing. His passion is the classic sextet of major long-distance events as far out as Barcelona. In 2006, when he was still in his 20s, he won the Ace Long Distance Award in Belgium with his namesake, De Stefano. And last year from Tarbes, a station the boys in Flanders think they own, he won first international hens with a 2-year-old flying 550 miles. Stefan works in a large building supply store. Everybody's English and French got a pretty good workout as we talked about his loft and methods. The long pigeon loft has sections for widowhood cocks on the left, young birds on the far right, racing hens in the middle with small compartments to sequester extra widowhood hens and spare cockbirds. It's a classic long-distance loft in that it's designed for ample airflow. Vents in the front, open wire ceilings, open soffit on the north side, and a tile roof let lots of air circulate. As you can see, it's also raised several feet off the ground. Stefan was preparing both his widowhood cocks and racing hens for the upcoming Pau International, less than 2 weeks away. He asked me to only take a minute inside his widowhood cock section, as he didn't want these birds disturbed. The section has no auxiliary heat or temperature controlling ceiling sliders. The hens are kept next door and sit in boxes, but Stefan also has a large hinged barrier he uses to lock them in their perches. He was proud of me when I got all the shots in about 60 seconds and everybody stayed calm. 1 minute. The hen section was another story. In here, newly remated pairs were diligently building nests with straw. Stefan's goal was to have all these hens on 10-day eggs by race day. All of his race birds were very calm, a trait Stefan says is essential in long-distance pigeons. His method is to mate his widowhood cocks with yearling hens, and his older long-distance hens with yearling cocks. Typically, his yearlings won't go much further than 400 miles. His 2-year-olds about 500, although the 2010 hen was an exception. And in spite of his once scoring 21 prizes of 28 birds shipped to Barcelona, he plans to be more conservative with his new loft this season. Hens, yes, but maybe only 2 or 3 males are likely to go to that race. The young bird section is simple wooden perches with a few nest boxes on the side, but don't get the idea the nests are for motivation. This young bird team will go no more than 60 kilometers in their first year. In typical long-distance fashion, Stefan will bring them on slowly in the hope that they have strong careers as 2 to 5-year-olds. Now you'll note the open portion of floor and slats that's found in all the sections. Droppings fall down between the joists and can be periodically cleaned out. An interesting idea. Stefan let the youngsters out for exercise before we went in for coffee, and as the flock wheeled over our heads, we happened to catch one of those moments I call a crazy Ivan. If you've seen the movie The Hunt for Red October, you know that Russian submarine captains were known to suddenly do erratic maneuvers to see if they were being followed. We've all seen these moments of aerial insanity in our young bird flocks, and one scientific theory I've heard says it's an instinctive method for a young pigeon to test the limits of its wings and tail. Why? To know how to escape from a raptor in the future. Over coffee, we had a chance to talk about some of the differences between Wallonia and Flanders. Stefan's achievements certainly bring honor to the area. There are almost 3 times as many Flemish fanciers, but there's a difference in attitude as well. The north seems to have a little more of the Dutch merchant mentality, while the south is a little more laid back, like their French neighbors. But while he may not be as assertive about selling pigeons as some, he certainly is every bit as passionate about winning, and we're certainly going to hear much more about this young man in the years ahead. Stefan Depassé, Saint-Amand. I told JJ I was impressed that a young fancier like Stefan was doing so well. Ever accommodating, he immediately altered our schedule so we could visit his friend's nearby feed store and meet a young fancier who worked there, who is also flying very well. When we arrived, JJ introduced us to Jean-Marc Thibault, a renowned local fancier who is partners with young Sandro Brunialti. For those of you who buy most of your pigeon supplies from a catalog or from a once-a-year trip to a big show, these pigeon shops will make you drool. Not just a little feed, but the full lines of 5 different brands. Not just one line of racing potions, but a half dozen or more. And above the feed and medication area, an array of nest boxes, perches, fronts, and just about everything you can think of for a pigeon loft, including pre-made doors and floors, and a trap for late arriving pigeons that fits a tile roof. Did I forget anything? Sandro is a handsome and friendly young man, although I think he left his razor in the same place JJ left his hairbrush. He showed me some of the store's items, including a ready-made box for widowhood hens and other gadgets. We then followed him the few miles to his home, passing the famous Château de Sombrif, an almost 1,000-year-old castle that's been recently restored and is now the site for catered events and weddings. For a pigeon man, Sandro married well. His wife is the local veterinarian. His small racing loft is a classic ready-made structure with young birds on the right and the widowhood race team on the left. Like any good pigeon man, he keeps more birds in every nook and cranny he can find. Stock birds in an old barn, and widowhood hens and some pigeons for his kids stuffed in the back corner of the same old space. He showed us his young bird team, including the white pigeon he keeps for his kids, and demonstrated how these factory-made lofts are set up for darkening. At the other end of the loft are his widowhood cockbirds. He told JJ he was prepping them for an interprovincial weekend race from 300 miles by giving them short tosses back to their hens, including one on the Wednesday morning of our visit. He says this revs them up, which is pretty obvious when you watch and listen to the amount of activity in here. He showed his ETS system and explained he keeps careful note of how fast each cock returns, and he also watches them closely in the loft to spot birds with extra motivation because of a rivalry. We later learned he won 13 prizes with this 15-bird team. His yearlings were 9 for 10, obviously responding to this motivation so well they can barely stay on the perch. Belgium will be hearing more from this young man in the future. A very nice person, Sandro Brunialti, sans brief. Our next stop on what would prove to be a hectic first day with Jean-Jacques was to the doctor's office. Come in for a checkup with Dr. Delove and you're likely to get a lecture about pigeons with your prescription, especially if you want to talk about distance racing. Dr. Alain and his wife Sigrid are settling into a new home and office. The good doctor said the home is Sigrid's dream, while his dreams have feathers. Alain is a second-generation pigeon fancier whose heart is indeed at the distance. And while he has had very strong results locally for years, in 2004 he decided to rev up his old family with Dutch long-distance blood that harks back to the Jan Arden strain. When Alain purchased expensive young birds from Cor de Hyde, the Dutchman threw in an extra cockbird, a free pigeon. You guessed the story. It became Alain's dream. In 2004, you bought. And then one was a gift.
Yes.
When you got the...
It's the best.
And the gift...
It's the best.
It's the best. She's the best.
Siring youngsters like Betty, who scored high in the Nationals as a yearling from France.
His name is Betty.
Betty. He brought some birds from the stock loft to demonstrate the pigeon quality and I think his favorite word in English language, soft.
This is the quality of the bird. Soft.
That is number one for you?
Yes. If the bird is no soft.
Soft. First, last, and always, slippery, silky feathers for the more than 250,000 wing strokes a distance pigeon will take in a race. He showed us a red cock that had been 10th international from Tarbes in 2010, coming home 10 meters a minute faster than 18th place Stéphane Depassé a few miles away. He looks carefully at a bird's throat, yes. Balance is important, yes. But in his mind there are two key things.
The balance, soft.
The eye?
Soft. And the racing, the race.
The paper.
The race.
Result.
Soft and the race.
Alain took us out to the huge backyard where the new lofts went up well before the house did. He raced young birds from here last year and was now racing yearlings and another young bird team. Relocating a distance team to a new loft is a little like starting an orchard. You expect it to take years to bear fruit. But his young cocks and hens have done extremely well this year on Roundabout. He took short distance averages in his big club, and that's against sprint specialists in a new loft. He uses wire and box perches to keep his hens from mating up, and he just put his birds together prior to basketing for a race that evening. The spacious new lofts are Alain's dream, that and the prospect of winning an international distance race. He sends his young birds no farther than 125 miles their first year, and for these yearlings, he wants them to have a single long test of about 400 miles. So, these pigeons, these are yearlings. They have gone no more than 200 kilometers as young birds. That's a maximum.
Yes.
And then in year number one, as yearlings now, you will make sure they are perfect and they will go 700 kilometers minimum.
Minimum.
And you will look at that result and say,
C'est sexy.
good, no good.
Okay.
And then your 2 and 3 year olds, they will go all the way to Barcelona, which is your dream.
Yes.
He showed us his adjustable sliders, but counts on sunshine and oxygen.
Sun, and air, de l'air. Huh? Sun, air, and by the bird, soft.
Right. And when I asked about using antibiotics, he warned against medicine.
For the long distance, medicacy is very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. Si vous ne donnez pas, c'est mieux. Very dangerous.
When we talked about vitamins or probiotics, he had another idea.
No. Salade.
Salad.
De salade, ils reçoivent à moi.
What kind of salad? Let's see the salad.
Salade, des légumes.
Right?
Des légumes.
From where?
Come.
The birds get fresh greens several times a week, as often as he remembers, he told JJ, and they certainly enjoy it. Dr. Delove let his young bird team out for some exercise and then demonstrated the cart I asked about standing next to the main young bird aviaries. Dr. Delove let his young bird team out for some exercise and then demonstrated the cart that I asked about that was standing next to the main young bird aviaries. The hungry youngsters rush inside the crate and he simply pulls the feeder when it's full. For a man who makes his living prescribing drugs, please take heart what matters to him about his pigeon's health. Few, if any, drugs, fresh air, sunshine, and fresh vegetables. In the winter, he increases the brewer's yeast he gives, but first, last, and always, he has 2 things in mind: results and soft plumage. When he wins an international, I bet it's with a soft and slippery specimen to be sure. Dr. Alain Delove, Saardam-Zaveline. When you visit 4 pigeon lofts in a day, things can kind of blend together in your mind. So in my notebook, I write an adjective or 2 to bring back memories. For Dr. Delove, you won't be surprised that I wrote the word soft. For this charming, tiny, long-distance man, Andre Decamp, I wrote calm and belle. You'll see why. Andre, another of JJ's many friends, lives in the village of Spee, about 20 miles northeast of Charleroi. Andre flew with his late father and is now ably assisted by his wife with both their old and young bird teams. They have a large back garden in semi-rural country. The young bird and stock loft is large and accommodates 2 rounds of youngsters in separate sections. The main widowhood racing loft is a classic example of this Belgian-born racing method and sits next to a pretty small pond in the garden. Andre's wife lets some of the widowhood cockbirds out for a spin. Andre's a friendly painting contractor who learned his love of long distance from his dad. The old loft has a hallway in front and sliding windows for exercising birds to come and go. For hot days and for trapping, he showed us the screen panel that he puts between the sliders. This family of birds have won many regional prizes, topped off with a Belgian national win from Bordeaux. Andre wants these widowhood cocks to rest quietly in their nest box. He wants to keep them up out of their droppings, and he feeds them individually in boxes. Several of these birds were going to a 400-mile race that evening, and he gave them mineral treatments in their cups. For longer distance work, Andre was adamant that the birds need to be tranquil. I asked if he had shown the hens.
No.
We struggled a little between French and English, but you can sum up Andre's thoughts in his one main word of English.
Calme. Il n'y a pas de pigeon, regarde, très calme, pas de problème, très calme.
Calm. The mantra of a classic long-distance widowhood cock trainer.
Calme.
In fact, the running water outside is even part of his thinking. He demonstrated the shade curtains and sliders he uses to darken the loft during the day to ensure his cocks are resting.
Pour le calme.
We later learned that of the 6 cocks he entered, he won 4 prizes. That's in spite of a film crew disrupting his routine on a basketing day. So on your words to remember for long distance racing, add the word calm right after soft, okay? I commented on the fresh odor in the loft, and Andre told me about a powder he uses in his painting business that he sprinkles under his grates. He called it creosote, but when he showed me the bag, I realized it's calcium hydroxide, which we would call slack lime or builder's lime, a cheap and inert absorbent you may want to consider. Andre showed us some individual pigeons, virtually all of whom go back to his main family, and the blue Bordeaux that flew so well for him topped off with a national win. The old boy wasn't around to be filmed, however. He's long since gone for a pretty penny. But for months before the bird left, he spent a lot of time in here. Andre wanted me to understand how he got so many offspring off the bird. If you haven't seen this, it's a very handy invention to breed from a single male with a quartet of females at a time. Technically, it's polygamous breeding, one male with many females. It's typically referred to as a bull system. As you'll see later, it's a fairly common trick in this part of the pigeon world. With this method, the cock occupies the center section and panels slide open to let him see individual hens. The hens are then let into the center, mate with the cock, and eventually lay in the bowl in their compartment. Nearby, foster parents are mated so the valuable eggs can replace their own. It's a time-consuming job, and not all the males or females adapt to the tiny compartments. But to get a lot of youngsters from the same male, it can work well. Frankly, it's a method used more commercially than by hobbyists, but it may give you a few ideas. While the cocks that were not going to the race played in the sky, Andre led his first round of youngsters out for a spin as well. Then the second round wandered onto the landing board like a bunch of 6-year-olds huddled together on their first day of school, and they gawked at their older brothers and sisters doing this mysterious thing called flying above their heads. Do you ever get tired of watching these young minds wrestle with the world outside the nest they've just left days before? I never do. And speaking of pigeon minds, here's why I wrote down the word bell in my notes about Andre. We were talking about distance racing and how he adapted his classic widowhood loft to electronic clocking. So ever helpful, Andre demonstrated how he converted the classic sliding front to put in an ETS pad. Then I asked about a hole that was cut in the landing board. His French explanation to JJ involved a lot of references to his father and Barcelona and sleeping, and he hauled out the pieces of what was an alarm system where a wire ran all the way to the house. You young fanciers who've never tried anything without microchips, pay attention. This was a clever way to keep from missing a 2-day bird. And while I'm teasing fanciers unfamiliar with the old days, take a look at what happens with a confident racing bird who's never had a countermark on his leg and encounters something new. As we had coffee and watched the cockbirds trap, this guy had us in stitches. I think we should put this clip on the internet so folks can have a laugh and learn about how decades ago, classic long-distance pigeons arriving from Spain learned to ring the doorbell to announce that they'd made it home. Andre Ducamp, Spee. This part of the world has no shortage of battlefields, sandwiched as it is between France and Germany and Northern Europe. JJ and I took time out to visit one, the fields in Waterloo, where this huge mound was erected to commemorate Napoleon's last and losing battle. It's now a tourist stop. Like so much of the world, a Big Mac isn't far away, but it was moving to be here and to remember that almost 200 years ago, a homing pigeon delivered news of the French defeat to a bank in London over a day before a horse messenger arrived. As I told the story to JJ, it took him a little while to remember the name of that lucky bank. Rothschild goes, "Oh, I will buy English bonds and sell French bonds." Oh, the Rothschild Bank. The Rothschild. Yes, the Rothschilds. Thanks in part to this secret pigeon post, they became the most powerful financial institution in the 19th century. The battlefield in Waterloo is only a few miles from the home of André Laurent in the prosperous farming village of Lane. Now in his 70s and a widower, Andre has raced from here for many years. His lofts are an eclectic selection of well-worn materials, and his feed room is a monument to bachelor living. Cobwebs and old breeding records, along with mementos of seasons past. A top competitor in this region since the 70s, JJ told me before Andre retired he decided to rev up his old family and purchased eggs from Antoine de Vos, Geiselbrecht, and several Dutch long-distance fanciers. The strategy paid off. In 2004, he won the 500-mile International from Béziers near Narbonne and has topped the region many times since. When we arrived, Andre was getting ready to train his Youngbird team. He keeps them in 2 large open sections with translucent sides and ceiling, maximum air and light, he said. He got a big kick out of some of the things we pointed our cameras at, like his dusty trophies and his tomato plants. He said he would show me his secret for good tomatoes. As the son of a farmer, he knows good fertilizer when he sees it.
Voilà. Voilà, voilà. Et avec ça, on va les mettre dans le seau d'eau, hein? Voilà.
The main widowhood loft has the Youngbird aviary-style loft on the right. Smaller buildings house his oldest widowhood cock teams and a selection of yearling hens. But Andre has little interest in roundabout or widowhood hen systems.
When you play too much hens, they make no eggs.
When I realized the main racing loft was all for cocks, I asked, where are the hens? Hidden on the far side of the building, he simply opens a door for them to fly back to their mates. And to protect them from rain and wind, he uses large pieces of shade cloth. Back inside the racing loft are numerous sections for his team of up to 80 widowhood cocks. They exercise for 90 minutes in the morning only, leaving the rest of the day for young birds or hen exercise. Andre likes the U-shaped nesting so his cocks can look at each other for motivation. I asked how he liked retirement, and he demonstrated his favorite thing to do in the day. The ceiling over the hallway is always open with wire to keep out small birds. When you study the photo of this main loft, it looks a little rough with its timber siding and ETS cables, but it hides a very clever design. When we were inside, looking at birds, I noticed how little accumulated bloom there was on the walls. Very, I mean, when you think of this, there's a little bit, but not much. Well, no, I'm used to, all over the world, our clothes always get so white. Always. Andre then explained that the open ceiling and the old tile roof created airflow, which he could control by adjusting the windows in front or putting in a screen section. Allows air, but no draft, no wind. But the key, he said, were his 2 doors that always allowed modest airflow. What? It's his secret?
He's saying he's CR.
And finally, the not 1 but 2 tiny holes over each compartment. But only 2. Did he put 1 and then test it?
Test.
1? No. 2? Perfect? This ventilation scheme, boosted occasionally by floor heat in the early season, was what kept his main team flying with such consistency. I looked at the old loft with new respect after that, kind of like realizing a dented old car has a huge hot motor under the hood. It's one of the things you learn to respect on these tours of lofts of 50-year veterans. There's always more here than meets the eye. Poor JJ again had to leave us to get back to his office, but Andre invited us to go training. And while he isn't interested in widowhood hen racing, he said he has begun to spend more time with his youngsters. He trains them more now and will race them as far as 250 miles, double what he once did, all to get a better picture of his yearling candidates. And like fanciers the world over, we then scanned the summer sky to see how long it took the youngsters to lock on for home and disappear from sight. Andre Laurent, Lane. So, after a day spent from sunrise to glorious sunset visiting pigeon lofts, what would you do after dinner for rest and relaxation? That's right, you'd go to shipping night at a friend's pigeon club. At least that's how my brain is wired. Almost anywhere I go in Belgium, I can't get rid of this almost childlike sense of wonder. It may sound corny, but I know that every village and most of the homes you see around you have at one time or another had racing pigeons. It never fails to touch my soul. You'd feel it too if you were here. JJ's Club is an old one, dedicated primarily to short and middle distance events. They've shipped out of the back room of this pub for many years. I think since the days when trains stopped to load baskets of pigeons bound for towns in France. Today's event was Montélimar, the 400-mile effort from France. These old clubs are a blend of the old and new. Wicker baskets stacked next to modern plastic units. ETS units scanning microchips next to ancient countermarking devices that are still used to double register birds in important races. On the wall, an ad for the international race from Pau, which would turn out to be a stunning English victory. Both JJ and Dr. Delove ship from this club. A century ago, most of the fanciers here would have arrived on a bicycle. And while race results are computerized, many of the checks and balances with paperwork and clocks and seals are timeless steps that have been taken the same way here for many, many years. The following morning, we had a visit to make on our own before we hooked up with JJ in the afternoon. He'd given us the address of Maurice Descendre, who lives on the outskirts of a village called Courelles. At first, we thought the GPS was wrong and had taken us to a construction site. Then we saw some pigeon lofts and knew we'd arrived. Maurice is a building contractor. Our confusion was that he and his wife are constructing a new home while living in a mobile unit while they do. Of course, like any good pigeon man, Maurice built the lofts first and races successfully here. He was the area's middle distance champ a few years ago and scores well in long distance events too. It's an eclectic layout with deer antlers on the pigeon lofts and hunting dogs he breeds tethered nearby. Maurice races from 3 different old bird lofts, regular widowhood in the 2 on the left and some natural hens in the 1 on the right. JJ's briefing had described Maurice as a tough guy, at least that's how I understood it, until I realized he was talking about him being a tough trainer. His main message was Maurice tends to get pigeons when others don't. The trio of lofts are something of a management challenge, but afford him a number of different compartments to bring birds into condition for specific races. His newest building is the one on the far right, and although he had a hen there in the top prizes in a national race, he doesn't think the building's dialed in yet. More light and more air are what he plans to add here. He showed us birds he was planning to ship to the next race and mentioned he was concerned they might drop a flight before the event, so he proceeded to burn the tip of the feather, a trick to add a week to 10 days to the time before it will drop. When I teased him by asking what happens if you don't smoke, he demonstrated the smokeless trimming system. In one of the widowhood sections, we had a chance to observe the birds with nice light coming in to film them. The corner drinker allows a single bird to capture an extra perch, and Maurice said the drinker bird was his best one in the section, and we watched as he claimed his own box as well as the shelf supporting the drinker. He punished any bird that got in his way or dared to take a drink. I know this is old hat to most of you, but for those of you who are new to the game, quietly observing this kind of behavior is a key to motivation. Ultimately, you're likely to see the bird that the bully doesn't bully, most likely the loft's true leader. And you can do what Maurice does, lock the drinker bird in his nest, let everybody get all the water they want, and ship him off, motivated to come back to claim his beloved corner. Simple motivational steps that only require your eyes and a little common sense. Maurice works his birds vigorously. You don't get a box unless you've done something in your first year on the road, and he's equally selective with his yearlings. The previous evening, he'd shipped 23 birds to Montélimar, hoping to better the 3rd Provincial 7th National he scored last summer. He walked us over to his young bird section. These birds will be worked hard at short distances, racing 3 or 4 times from 150 miles, and then carefully selected before any advance to the yearling team. Adjoining the young bird section is the concrete block stock loft and a center area where he keeps his widowhood hens. He's not one for a lot of medication. The birds get a regular drinker of homemade garlic water and once or twice a week apple cider vinegar. This in addition to commercial vitamins and minerals. But Maurice is a great believer in natural health and vitality. The proof of this is in our last stop before we went to have coffee. After the races are over and he knows who he's keeping for the following year, this is where they go until spring. Outside, uncovered, and living like wild birds for months at a time. For those of you new to the game, you should know this is an oxygen treatment many champions have sworn by for almost as long as we've had champions in pigeon racing. But normally, there's at least a roof they're under. Not here.
Tout neige. Igloo. comme igloo. Et les pigeons dedans. Ici, neige jusque-là. Les pigeons comme ça sur la neige.
The pigeons are standing on the
Sur la
snow.
neige. Sur la neige. Mais le nez,
Yeah.
why?
Blanche.
Santé, santé extraordinaire.
Perfectly white.
Meilleur qu'au pigeonnier. Santé là, meilleur que dans le pigeonnier.
I can understand why Maurice may get pigeons home when others in the area don't fare as well. First, they have to get through a very fine net to make it to the old bird team as yearlings. A decent performance there then earns you the right to enjoy an all-expense-paid 4 or 5 month winter vacation in here before you return to the racing loft for the following season. I think there's a word for those kinds of pigeons developed by this building contractor: hard as nails. Maurice Descendre, Courcelles. For our last visit on this trip to friendly Wallonia, we followed Jean-Jacques through Charleroi to the town of Marbeau-la-Tour. Here for more than half a century, an elegant gentleman named Francois Collard has been defending the honor of French-speaking Belgian pigeon men. Francois and his wife own a small convenience store adjacent to their home, but since the 1950s, the business of pigeons has been very much a part of their lives. Their tidy home is decorated with pigeon mementos, including 3 national victories, Ace Pigeon Awards, regional trophies, and of course knickknacks. Francois is a dignified 82, and in a sport where far too many men wear rumpled t-shirts for their official victory photos, it's refreshing to see a gentleman racer who's been dressing up for his since the 1950s. The attention to detail isn't limited to his wardrobe either. Francois guided us out to the racing loft that adjoins his home. It's a 2-story structure with the classic Belgian attic space where air is allowed to escape through roof tiles. The racing sections, where his widowhood cocks live, can only be described as immaculate. He said he stays exclusively with widowhood cocks because of limited space, but I imagine it's tradition as well. The floors are some type of linoleum, and Francois and his wife clean them no less than once a week. The bulk of his team were away at the race from Montélimar. When I asked Francois if there was any particular feature he thought was most important in long-distance pigeons, he talked about what he likes to see in a bird's wing. Okay, he wants a short forearm in here, the short forearm, and then this bone from the forearm to here, he wants a slight curvature to it. He wants you to be able to feel, which I can feel in this pigeon. I think looking at it like that, there's a curve. There's a curve here.
Okay.
Correct? Correct? C'est très important. Très important. The southern-facing section of the building is made up of large, wire-enclosed aviaries built over the kitchen and utility rooms below. He showed us his youngbird section and pointed out a sprinkler system for plants that he saw in a pigeon loft in Portugal and had installed for his birds. I'm sorry to not have video of it sprinkling, but can tell you that Francois said the youngbirds absolutely love it. No more bath pans. Now, in the immortal words of Henry Ford, at the Collard Lofts you can have any color pigeon you want as long as it's a blue bar. I mentioned this to JJ and Francois, remembering the white flights and checkers that helped him win a national championship in the 80s, and this led to one of my favorite stories of our time near Charleroi. Francois may be in his 80s, but like so many champions, he's always looking for the right outcross for his successful family. Almost 10 years ago, he bought a cockbird from the famous Duras-Sablon partnership that he then mated to a sister of his national winner, Dee Dee. They bred a son that proved to be an exceptional racer and breeder. And in order to get the maximum benefit of this outcross, he's developed a simple but oh so effective breeding system that goes well beyond the bull system in its tiny box. In a small section with access to an aviary, he keeps what he calls the Sablon cock and 3 other special males. Each bird controls the board in front of its nest front. His favorite actually controls 2. Francois says the wide board is essential in this system. Now behind the wire fronts are hens in a nest bowl. Each afternoon, Francois methodically lets an individual hen go with the cock into the aviary and then back to her bowl. He repeats this over and over, and after a few days knows the hen has been fertilized. When she lays, the eggs go to foster parents next door. The cards next to the nest box represent individual hens and their visits here. Later, when we were inside, I asked how many youngsters he had from this top cockbird.
16 sablons, 17 sablons, 18, 19 sablons.
By mid-June, he was up to 60. So what should we call this system perfected by the old veteran? Earlier, when I suggested the smiling cock, we all had a good laugh when JJ translated. The hens who are part of this breeding system are kept in another building with a large adjoining aviary where they get plenty of fresh air, sun, and rain. Although, as Francois went up and down the stairs to show us some selected hens, I wonder why do so few pigeon men seem to think of handrails for themselves? The rest of the building, where the hens are kept, is for foster parents. You can imagine how many are needed if a single cockbird has 60 offspring in a few short months. The immaculate lofts and meticulous care are always wonderful to see in a successful pigeon operation. When we returned to the dining room for coffee and dessert, Francois told a number of stories from his early days of racing. One related to the Jansen brothers. Francois knew them rather well and once asked one of the brothers to go with him from Arendonk to select some pigeons. As they were returning from the 60-kilometer journey, Francois's 30-year-old passenger admitted it was the farthest this Jansen had ever been away from home.
Never go so far. 60 kilometers.
The sheltered lives of those famous pigeon men are very unlike this sophisticated fellow, and it was a real pleasure to visit with someone still winning after more than a half a century in the game here in Wallonia. Francois Collard, Marbais Latour. Earlier, I gave credit to some friends who suggested people and places I should meet. But I have to give credit to an entire country for giving me the concept for this show. When I displayed our films at the Blackpool Pigeon event in January, the second day of the show, Sunday, a constant stream of people asked me the same question. One after the other, hour after hour, they asked, "How come you never come to Wales?" I didn't really have a good answer. And by the end of the day, the idea of visiting places even I hadn't considered was fixed in my head. The motivation to boldly go was born there. In Wales, you deserve the credit. But there's more to this story. Only later did I discover that the Sunday parade was in fact a charade. I learned that my films and lack of Welsh champions had been the major tavern topic among a large group of Celts the previous evening. They hatched a fiendish plan, asked this simple question, posed repeatedly over and over an entire Sunday by people buying my movies, was intended to tip the scales in my meager mind to visit Wales. To those Welsh pigeon people, I can only say it worked. Whatever the genesis of your question, it was a fair one. As one elderly Welsh fancier commented, "Jim, you've been everywhere else, you better come see us." So here we go, Wales, the final frontier. Destination, Tony Pandy, a classic Welsh coal mining village and the home of Gareth Watkins. Now, if Martin and JJ are helping to raise awareness of pigeon prowess in Germany and southern Belgium, no one living under the flag of the Red Dragon has done more to honor Wales' best pigeon men and its history than this humble pigeon scribe. I've corresponded with Gareth for many years, and when I asked if he'd help me spotlight some of his region's champions, his response was immediate and positive. Gareth's tidy cottage shares a wall on either side with its neighbors, classic housing created when the mines were booming over a century ago. There's little on the street side other than the house number to differentiate one abode from the other, but each of these row homes has been designed with a relatively spacious back garden. Gareth's is wall-to-wall pigeon lofts, buildings his father constructed and used. And when these homes were erected, thousands of other back gardens in these valleys contained racing pigeons. While there are fewer fanciers now, the passion of Welsh pigeon men is undiminished. In fact, it's fair to say it may be stronger today, especially at the long distance, than it ever was. Gareth is a second-generation long-distance man. His father was an accomplished fancier, and the Watkins Loft have an unbroken 50-year streak of at least one club win a year here. Over sandwiches, he told me of a half-dozen lofts he had in mind, and many were examples of the significant rebirth of long-distance racing in this part of the world. We took a little time to visit his birds before our tour began. One thing about Welsh hillside lofts is you're pretty much assured of a view, and Gareth's is no exception. His stock loft and widowhood loft are at ground level, but another old bird loft and his young bird loft are up on top. However, to get from one level to the other, he negotiates an old set of playground stairs without the benefit of a handrail. Please don't tell his insurance man. The upper lofts have been modified over the years to improve light and ventilation. Gareth uses vented skylights in his young bird section with a slider of pegboard to darken without eliminating airflow. However, this young bird team only sees light duty in their first year, saving up for 2 or 3 or more years at the distance. The second-generation lofts have also benefited from the introduction of green shade cloth to add ventilation and light through once solid walls. Gareth's first national win came from a race from Belgium when he was in partnership with a longtime neighbor, Doug Cockcroft. Sadly, his ally died the following year, and it took some of the passion Gareth had for his team's performance. However, as a historian and spokesman for Welsh pigeon racing, that flame still burns bright. His articles on Welsh fanciers are very popular and well-read, and he's a fountain of history of the days of the great Welsh Homing Union.
I can remember I was race controller for the Welsh North Road Fed, which was the biggest federation in Great Britain. And in one season, in 25 races, we convoyed 360,000 pigeons. And that was in the 80s, the mid-80s.
After lunch and our brief tour, we set out for our first visit, and the enthusiastic stories of Welsh racing became a fixture of our drives with Gareth. Never mind that it's one of the great long-distance lofts in the country, the term picturesque doesn't begin to describe the farm home and lofts of Wilf Reed. Set on a rolling 77-acre property, literally on the border between Wales and England, Wilf has scored in the top 3 positions in the Welsh South Road some 16 times from this imposing loft, as well as 2/3 and a 5th in the National Flying Club from Pau, and a first open in the British Barcelona Club's 700-mile contest from Paloma, Spain. Wilf and his wife Janet not only raised a family here, but also a strain of sheepdogs so smart and well-trained that Wilf represented all of Great Britain several times in world sheepdog competition. As to his pigeon racing prowess, his pedigree there is impressive as well. His father was an avid pigeon man, as were all of his many sons, so Wilf has been facing intense competition since he was a wee lad, as they say. The farmhouse is pushing 300 years, and the sturdy racing loft will probably last that long as well. Measuring 50 by 12, it's built of stone and inch-thick plywood. Everything is sturdy. The heavy metal stairs, for example, cost Wilf a truck to haul them in.
These stairs will tell a story again. I wrote a bloody truck off bringing them home.
So you've got probably the nicest view. A 4-foot hallway runs the length of the southeast-facing front wall. It remains open much of the time, and the birds come and go over the valley below. Wilf alternates which sex goes out at daybreak, and he expects his old birds to put in 2 hours of flying every day. As he's aged, he likes to take the precaution of a dust mask when he's in the loft, and at 80, he seldom trains anymore, letting the early races get his old bird team in shape. Like so many other fanciers we heard from on this trip, hawks are a big problem in Wales, and Wilf has seen his losses increase dramatically in recent years. The long and spacious loft is bracketed at either end by a covered wire aviary. On the west end are Wilf's cockbirds, while the hens are at the other end. Young birds are housed in a separate loft and only train out as far as 40 miles. But they get a lot of tosses, often alone, and Wilf likes to also liberate them whenever race birds are released nearby, all to get these young birds to have confidence and not panic as yearling racers. Wilf's Old Bird Loft is a good example of the now preferred system of long-distance racing in Wales. The birds are on roundabout semi-widowhood early in the season. Then, as the convoyers begin to cross the channel on the way to the bottom of France and Spain, he selectively remates his racing pairs so he can send competitors in their most intense phase of the nesting regimen.
Well, everything is based on the long distance, like.
So the hens will go in here.
Yeah.
And you worry about, do they mate up with the...
Oh, no, that is the problem, one problem.
Yeah.
The buggers will start playing with one another.
And then the males will go in that other section?
Other side, yeah. But in the day, they're out in the cages.
Okay.
They're just laying now.
Just getting ready for...
Yeah, for the big job. That'll be going to Barcelona.
Wilf prefers 3- and 4-year-old birds to go to the south of Spain. But when he's setting up his team, he often pairs younger birds with older ones and sends them both. He described a young cock and his older hen.
So she'll stick to that nest.
She'll be pipping and he'll be on 10-day eggs.
He'll be off to Tarbes and she'll still be looking after the nest, hopefully. And with a baby, probably. Or coming up to that. And they know when them eggs, or how good them eggs are.
Yeah.
The bit of vibration and whatnot.
The management is dead simple. Lots of exercise, few medications, and lots of local grains as the base feed. Wilf uses copious amounts of barley through the winter and higher carb commercial mixtures during the race season. But as I would see again and again, the main food is locally grown peas and beans. And because he buys direct from local farmers, he showed me his favorite gadget, a cement mixer that he mixes and cleans his grain in, knocking off the dust from the farmer's field. His raised loft boasts wire floors and vented ceilings. There's plenty of air here, and he keeps a reasonable number of pigeons for a 600-square-foot building. With 70 years in the pigeon game, Wilf scoffs at eye sign and wing theory, having given each what he feels is a fair shot. He advocates good pigeons, proven in the basket, given lots of exercise, and pinpoint motivation for a specific race. That's sound advice from a pigeon ace and a world-class breeder and trainer of sheepdogs. This is a wise old owl in terms of animal husbandry, fur or feathered. I don't see a lot of secrets in here.
No. No.
It's just pretty straight
just
ahead.
Basic. Come on now. Come on.
Once an avid widowhood flyer, Wilf admits he came into the roundabout system by chance in the 70s, long before many others. He credits wife Janet with making him realize his hens were a wasted asset and described the accident that led him to start flying and winning with his hens.
I suppose it started back when I had a disaster sending birds on a wagon that was bringing burnt lime here to the farm. And I sent a basket of birds on that wagon, cocks, because I was busy lambing at the time, up to my eyes with it. And there was a bit of lime hung on the sides of the wagon, and of course on the road it started vibrating, shaking. And I had birds coming home with their eyes burnt, and some didn't come home, and so on and so forth. So now
the team was in the
yeah, I didn't have the quantity of birds then, just a basket of cocks. And I was prepared to pack in. I was so sick. Janet said, "Why the hell don't you race those hens?"
What year was that?
Oh, bloody hell, that's the early 70s.
So then what happened? This is a good story.
So why don't you get and race those hens? And I did have a few cocks as well that survived the job. So I realised then that we was wasting good pigeons on the widowwood.
So these hens, your replacement team,
I raced them.
Based on your wife's recommendation.
I think I won 28 first that year.
Since that day in the 70s, he's flown his own roundabout system, and when we retired to the parlor for a beautiful lunch served by Janet, we saw the blend of cocks and hens that have won so many distance races to this beautiful farm. It was certainly a stunning place to start our visits at this gorgeous farm location on the Welsh border. Wilf Reed, Monmouth. You'll have to get up early in the morning if you want to beat Dennis Ford, say about 5 a.m., 7 days a week. Since he retired from the aerospace industry years ago, Dennis's daily routine, spring and summer, is to spend each day at the tidy allotment lofts where he and his late father Tom began racing almost 50 years ago. The allotment gardens offer a stunning view south over Blaenhaven. The historic Big Pit coal site is a few miles away. These community grounds have been home to pigeon lofts for decades, but none here are quite as tidy nor anywhere near as successful as the pigeon man who arrives here first and leaves last during racing season. It was spitting rain when we first arrived with Gareth and Mary and Ray Strawbridge, and we were treated to quite a few long-distance stories until Ray had to take Gareth to catch his train. Then, as the sun came out, Dennis and I visited his lofts, and he showed me what he laughingly called his secrets. What is the best thing to happen to this great pigeon flyer in a half-century career?
We don't roundabout. I used to fly without, but wasting too many good ends. And I was landing up with a lot of ends, and I thought, this is wasteful. And I read a bit about this roundabout, so I thought, I'll have a crack at that. And that was the best thing I done.
Dennis has 2 lofts devoted to old birds, and he explained his simple approach to the system. Roundabout for Dennis involves this twice daily routine. In the morning, the hens go out for an hour. Move the cocks into the hen section. Let the hens trap through the open door, walking over the ETS pad into the nest section. Let the cocks out for an hour. Move the hens back into their section, and let the cocks trap back into the nest box section. Very simple, and unlike Wilf and others you'll meet later, he does not pair up for the long races. Both cocks and hens fly only to their nest box all season, out to more than 600 miles. Here's another secret hiding in plain sight: a hopper of peas and beans in front of the birds 24/7. It's obviously a feeding system that's back with a vengeance here in Wales. Ray Strawbridge said it best about adopting this.
I had to go back 30 years to come forward, and that's the God's honest truth.
Dennis swears by this cheap, locally grown mixture with one very important addition. To get his birds to trap quickly, he gives them this. This is his treat or trapping mix. There's enough of this high-carb and fat mix in this cup for 16 racers.
Let me just see if I got it clear. This is you buy a year's worth of this.
Yeah.
And mix it together.
Yeah.
And this is kind of your all-purpose, what's in front of them, whenever they want it, including when they're breeding. This is your breeder mix too.
When they are breeding, that is also in the bowls, because I don't give my pigeons any seeds when they're very youngsters at all.
Now, what about when you're getting ready to send them to a race now?
I don't take the hoppers out; they stay in there.
So they always have this.
Yeah.
This is always in front of them.
Never take it out from there.
Do you change this?
Only increase with the maize and the peanuts.
More carbs and more peanut fat.
That's it. Yeah. So.
2 days before?
No, about a week before.
A week before.
Yeah. I increase that.
Now, when we say a week before, is that a week before the first race or a week before the distance?
Before the distance race.
Some visitors have been dumbfounded his birds would trap when hopper fed, but they don't see him gobble up the trapping mix. They also don't believe about Dennis flagging his birds and not training.
Somebody came here one day and he was looking on the floor, but by the time they come here to have a look, that had gone. They'd had it up.
Even though he makes no secret of his feeding, many people didn't understand it, didn't believe him.
No. Because I've seen them come in here and they've been looking into my hoppers and saying, oh, you do, that's the way you do feed. I say, well, of course it is.
And they don't believe it.
Oh, another thing they don't believe me, they don't believe that I don't train my old birds. They don't go in the basket at all. About 7 years ago, I only used to give them 2 training tosses. And then I start race. And then Percy, then the pair again, took my Saints National winner. So I called it a day. So for the last 5 years, they don't have no training, basket training at all. Old birds I'm talking about now, mate. And they just go in the first race. I just hope that the first 2 or 3 races are good weather, and I sling the lot in.
So Percy the Falcon ended old bird training, and it made no difference in the growing list of national wins for Dennis Ford. Here's another observation. In this racing loft, there are virtually no potions. Other than the grocery store apple cider vinegar he gives twice a week, nothing else on the shelf. Oh, I'm wrong. In the blue bowl is one potion. Someone gave it to him, and he says he won't buy more when it's gone.
It's always nice to meet somebody who's been open with his secrets and people don't believe
There's
him.
no secrets. I know, there's no secrets.
Dennis showed us his main old bird racing loft and the simple retrofit for open door trapping he created when he went to ETS clocking for South Road races. To keep birds from flying through the hole and not being picked up by the ETS, he puts peanuts on the edge so they stop for a snack before they go home. At one end were his main hen team. In this space are a handful of national winners. And how much does this long-distance ace worry about these girls pairing up in this little section before they race?
If sometimes they pair up, they lay eggs and just throw them out. I found it doesn't make no difference.
So you have to admit, it doesn't get a lot simpler than this. Oh, it gets a lot cheaper.
There was an article in one of the papers about somebody up in the other side of Eddyford. He read what Gareth wrote about me, you know, my feeding system and all that. And the following year, he changed to my system. And he wrote somewhere, or he told somebody, or he got back to me anyway. It was the best thing he ever read, because he said, I'm saving pounds, he said, and what an easy way to feed pigeons. And he's winning.
The basic food's available 24/7, with the addition of another dirt-cheap local grain, barley.
The malt's done.
Yeah.
At the end of November, you'll start to put 60% barley into here. For how long?
I paired up on the 24th of January, and they want it till then at least anyway. And then when I pair up, and then once I feel that they're going to lay, then I decrease the barley and increase the peas and beans. But once the youngsters are hatched, that's the end of the barley.
Dennis's breeding system is also straightforward, winner to winner. And the road to the stock loft is simple. Win, and you are in. But no matter your race record, you'd better produce.
First national Bergerac, 500 mile. Second national Bergerac, 500 mile, St. Res. First national Saints, 400 mile. And a string of others of as long as that in the first 20 of the national.
So he's a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
36849. And he's a breeder, you're saying?
I put him in the stock loft because he won so much, right? I've had him paired with 2 hens this year. I got 1 youngster out of him. 1 youngster. So if you don't liven up, you'll be back on the road next year.
Ford's simple, no-nonsense approach includes some very good ideas. For example, when his pigeons land on the edge of the roof, to keep birds from throwing grain out of his bowls, he uses a scrap piece of chicken wire. Here's an inexpensive feeder made from a piece of water pipe.
They go like that, the beans go up there.
Now, Dennis doesn't allow his birds to ever pick on the ground, but a few times a week they get not just a bath, but a shower. His wonderful garden owes its vitality to aged pigeon manure, and the birds get a lot of greens. And whenever a raptor shows up over the loft, Dennis employs a device that comes from a farm supply store. It's an agricultural rocket that explodes in the air and scares off the predator. And finally, since he spends the majority of his time out here, during race season, here's a cozy area for himself.
Fridge?
And I got my microwave over here.
13 national wins and counting, with young and old birds at all distances. And as you saw, a very simple and inexpensive roundabout system with magical results for Dennis Ford of Blainhaven. Armed with our trusty sat-nav, we left Dennis Ford's and traveled to the other side of what they call a mountain here in Wales. In Montana, it would be more in the moderate hill category. We were on our way to the home of Derek Flowers in Pontypool. And Welsh Pigeon people have choice words for what Derek and his brother have done to Welsh racing lately. Words like fantastic, incredible, and others I can't use here because this is a family show. Now, Brother Clive wasn't available, but Derek welcomed us to his tidy home and was proud of their new loft. The brothers have been back in the game for 5 years, and it's been a miserable period for their competitors. The name Flowers has bloomed at the top of the race sheet more than 50 times since their return. Gareth told me it's probably the greatest comeback in Welsh history. These are not new kids on the block. The Flowers are second-generation pigeon men. Here's Derek with his dad and trophies from an era when his father flew natural, and Derek had a wee bit more hair. Derek's main idea in the loft was to have a long corridor at the front, and he explained where the idea came from.
I knew I was going to go a roundabout.
That's one of the first things you probably heard, that
Yeah.
people were racing hens.
That's right, yeah. Well, like I said, when I raced them with my father, it was all natural. It was all natural racing. So the other cocks now, they think we've come over now to open up the boxes for them. So this is another thing that I swear by.
I love this stuff.
Got to have that open all day. Every day.
Well, your dad didn't have this. I mean, this is a wonderful...
He didn't have this stuff, but he did have wire mesh doors. Yeah. He always had the doors open. And he always said...
He had a green front, white dowels, and the rain blowing in.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But he used to put shutters up through the winter. But my father always said that, you know, oxygen is free, give them as much oxygen as you can. And he always had what we call a walkway, a veranda, through the loft. And he used to say, this is my space, that's their space. And that's why I had this veranda through here. And like I say, I swear by having a veranda in a loft, because you're away from the pigeons and you can do a lot more observation. The design part of this loft for me was just the ventilation and having the veranda through here and having the different compartments to keep the hens and the cocks and the young birds.
The corridor has a fixed wire section above, and you'll also note in other photos that there are wire ceilings at the back of the sections. Now at the far end, the final section is for darkened young hens. Then there's an adjoining section for young cocks. Note the door between the sections and the perches with a swing panel that can make them into nest boxes. Then come the roundabout cocks. Then the roundabout hens. And finally, a spare section for long-distance birds that he stopped using when his roundabout team did well on their own. The green shade cloth which covers each door lets in plenty of oxygen for the pigeons. The fronts are open all day, and at night and during the winter, they simply slide the solid doors together. Since this open door design doesn't include aviaries, Derek showed me a rolling unit he uses to let a section have more sun or to take a bath. Knowing they'd be racing on the roundabout system with their old bird team led Derek to design his loft differently than if he was racing widowhood.
I think with widowhood pigeons, you need to control the ventilation, control them, stop them looking outside, keep them quiet all day. I've read all the books, you know, listen to different people. And widowhood flying is totally different to roundabout. I haven't got a structure as such for these during the day. If I get visitors, they come across and look at the birds. I don't put no loft coats on. I'll handle pigeons any time of the day. People to hold them. And I've had comments, you know, well, is it all right if we look at the pigeons? You know, would the pigeons be okay? I do what I want to do.
What do you think your dad would say when he'd look in here and realize that you? I mean, have the girls won more than the boys for you, or about the same?
Distance-wise, yeah, they have. But my dad always raced hens anyway. Naturally, yeah. And my father used to say a 2-year-old hen on eggs is as good as anything.
Derek manages the race team and Clive concentrates on the stock birds. And when they return to the sport, Derek says he got some great advice from the old sage Wilf Reed.
He said, my advice to you is, he said, pay as much as you can afford for pigeons and try and lose them. he said then he'll end up with some decent pigeons.
The Flowers decided to buy their initial stock birds from the racing trio of Wall, London Green. They also had a plan that did not include breeding from the race team for several years. They were only foster parents.
Because for 3 years I never bred off my races. I never bred off my races at all. I used to fetch the stockbirds' eggs down, I'd pair them up so that I'd have these on eggs at the same time as the stockbirds, and I'd bring the stockbirds' eggs down and I would rear the first round under the races. Yeah, yeah. Because I was producing a lot of my races from the stockbirds, obviously, so I didn't want to breed out of my races until I found out just how good they were, you know. And it took me 5 years really before I realised the way I had to pair my stockbirds with the stock that I had, because I swapped them around for the first 4 years, different pigeons with different pigeons. They never had, only one pair I ever kept together, and they kept producing me good pigeons, good pigeons. But I think it takes you 3 or 4 years to find out exactly what them stockbirds are capable of producing.
Is there anything you'd change if you're doing it again today?
Not really, not in the design of the loft. I'd like to have a double-decker loft, but because of the impact on the neighbours, I've decided not to. I get a problem here trapping pigeons. They come off fast races and they don't want to come down. But if I had a double-decker loft, they'd come straight in. I think they'd come straight in.
The Flowers have had great success with their darkened youngsters, and Derek talked about some of the changes he's been making with them in the last few years.
And I've actually taken them off the darkness now, the 14th of June.
On the 14th of June?
On the 14th of June, a week early, yeah. And the reason I did that, because the last 2 years, I've had a bit of a problem getting them to cast them flights, them end flights. So I'm trying a week early. Next year it might be 2 weeks early. I'll just see how it'll go. But yeah, to get them to cast them 2 flights, I think.
So when they were here and you were darkening,
I darkened here, Jim. Darken at the front here. The reason I darken at the front is because I can keep all the ventilation open.
Right, that's critical.
Critical. I did darken here the first year, and I shut the light off coming through that ventilation, and I had a respiratory problem.
So now you leave that back open.
Leave it all
There's
open.
a little bit of light in there.
Yeah.
It's probably not as dark as it was the first time.
That's right. Well, I can see my watch, just about see my watch. But I think that's
now
adequate.
Now this last year into this, in 5 years into this loft, you've had great success with your youngsters.
Yes. Yes, very, very good success. Yeah, I won a Young Bird National last year as well.
Just like this.
Just like this.
They're not, well, we got,
what I do late, as
you letting them nest up? And
as the national races approach,
okay.
Because we've only got 3 Young Bird Nationals, so about 2 weeks before the first national race, I will open up these boxes. They're called Pippo, Pippo perches.
Right.
So I will darken that, put a pan in there, in about 8 places in each compartment, and just let them pair up as they want to pair up.
So your system right now is you exercise these guys, they come back and go in. You exercise these guys, they come back and go in.
Yeah.
Before a short race, you'll let them mix and match,
Yes.
play around a little bit.
Yeah, play around a little bit.
They all
Yeah,
go.
definitely, and they all go to the race. Yeah.
And then before the major races, you're going to get them thinking that they're married and having a family.
That's right. That's right.
So they'll be coming back to a nest box, not just a perch.
That's how I won the Young Bird National last year. I was first and second with 2 cockbirds that were sitting. They were sitting eggs.
How many day eggs?
14 days, 15 days. And the year before, I had a little hen sitting, because obviously some youngsters take to it better than others. And she won 4 races, sitting eggs. She didn't win a national, but she won 4 races, topped the federation, second federation, just by sitting them eggs. I tend to look more for the darkness hours than the light. Because as soon as I start rearing youngsters, they come down from the stock loft. It's about mid-March, first week of March, as I'm parting them off. And I put up them shutters at 6 o'clock in the night. I darken at 6 o'clock in the night and I take them down at 9 o'clock in the morning. So that's 15 hours of dark. 15 hours of darkness. That's what they get. And they get that right through until I take them off. I try and get them shutters
Until
up.
a couple of days ago.
Yeah. I try and get them shutters up at 6 o'clock in the night. And I'll take them down 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
The fantastic young bird results are only half the story. The Old Bird Roundabout team have also been spectacular, and Derek has his own ideas about his roundabout hens mating up.
That's another thing that people say to me. I throw the rule book out the window on hens mating. I don't care. I'm not bothered if they want to mate.
Just throw the eggs out.
Yeah, throw the eggs out, obviously. But I had 3 hens mating down on the floor one year, and I actually put a nest pan in for them to encourage them, because they was going to lay on the floor anyway. Because they was cutched up on the floor all the time. So I put a nest pan down there for them. Now the 3 of them hens laid.
6 eggs.
6 eggs. And they'd queue up to sit them eggs. And I sent them to the race, and I was 1st, 2nd and 3rd federation with them 3 hens. Then I took them off them, and I paired them back with their cockbirds. Because when I get a certain distance, I repair the pigeons for the long distance races, so they are raced then naturally.
Well, who wrote the rule book on that?
Exactly. That's what I've always. People say to me, "You want to put wire mesh on the floor," and they've said, "You don't want your hens mating," and I say, "Why?" Well, because they won't be so amorous for the cockbirds. I said, "No, but they're amorous towards each other, and they're happy."
You probably are a little nervous about how far would you send a hen if she was eggy and you were worried that she'd lay in the basket. Is that a major concern?
If I thought she was going to lay, I wouldn't send her.
At all?
Definitely wouldn't send her. No distance. No distance. And I wouldn't send her for like 48 hours after she'd laid her 2nd egg. Because the strain on a pigeon laying an egg must be pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
I've known people to send them after they laid 1 egg, so they race home to lay their 2nd egg. I don't go with that. I got plenty of other pigeons.
It's like a pregnant woman racing home because the doctor's
There's
there.
plenty of other pigeons in the loft with a chance of winning a prize without taking a chance on a good pigeon coming home, racing home to lay a 2nd egg. I wouldn't do that. I just wouldn't do that. But after them pigeons have mated and they go back to their cockbirds, they forget one another. They really do forget one another. And I've had a pigeon every year. She won a national last year at 517 miles, Severn. She won that by 2.5 hours. There was only 2 pigeons home on the day. And when she came here, she could have flown another 100 miles. She was just perfect. She was sitting 9 days. And before I repaired her, she was sat on a pair of eggs on the floor by there with another hen. So less than 3 weeks after I took her from that hen, she won a national, sitting her own eggs with her cockbird.
So it sounds like what you're saying, if I get it right, is that it doesn't matter if they lay eggs. You used it to go 1, 2, 3 in a major race.
Yes.
And by the time they're back to their normal relationship, it erases the computer and it just kind of resets the whole
Absolutely, yeah. Especially when they're going back to their box.
Now, when you
and
tell
their
that to other
cockbird.
people, what do they tell you?
Well, I had a guy on the phone from Ireland. I supplied him with some youngsters last year. And he phoned me 3 days in succession and asked me to repeat that story to him. He had people in the room listening to me. He couldn't believe what I was telling him. And he was laughing and he was saying to me, "Derek, I can't believe him saying this."
The roundabout system is textbook simple.
Basically, in the morning, the hens go out. And The cockbirds, you open the door here?
Open the slide there, yeah.
There's a slider down here, that opens up, they come in here.
They come in.
The hens trap back in.
Yeah.
Get fed.
Get fed in there.
The boys are out.
The boys are out.
Girls come over here. Males go in, they get fed. Everybody's in for the morning.
Yeah.
And that is from when to when in the morning?
I like them to do an hour each exercise in the morning and an hour each exercise in the evening.
Also, like his neighbor on the other side of the hill, the Flowers Old Bird team gets no training. Derek explained his reasoning.
I don't train my pigeons at all during the racing season. Now that's another thing. People won't believe me.
Yeah. Dennis said the same thing. Dennis Ford, he said.
I train at the start of the season. Just a little reminder. 25, 30 miles down the road, that's all. It's 10 mile first, then a 15, then a 20. Stop. Because our first race is only 50 miles. So, but the pigeons are locked up through the winter. They are locked up. Once they start molting, the racing season's finished, they are locked up. And that is because of the peregrines. If there were no peregrines, I would let these pigeons do what they want to during the autumn and have them out on selected days during the winter. But because of the peregrine, I can't let them out.
A short walk across the lawn is the stockbird section, which was created by joining two small buildings. A long, partially covered aviary allows the breeders to be outside in all types of weather. One of the buildings houses some other birds that competitors think give Derek an edge when he's working with his racing pigeons, because this Welshman is one of Europe's foremost canary breeders. Derek doesn't think his champion status there means much in the racing game, and he says he'll likely just concentrate on pigeons in the future. But I asked him a penetrating question about his canaries.
Now, what's the maximum distance you can race a canary?
About 6 yards.
6 yards?
And he dropped to the floor.
The brothers also have a few individual pens for top pairs to breed in. In spite of winning dozens of prizes in a few short years, there are no pigeon trophies on display in the Flowers home. When I asked Derek if I could see some, we ended up looking through dusty boxes in the attic. And while we were editing this segment, Gareth wrote me to say Derek had won the coveted Queen's Cup for the best performance over 300 miles into Wales. I wonder what box that trophy will get stored in. This is the kind of champion that should really scare you. Been around pigeons since he could walk, somehow mentally connects with animals, especially feathered ones, and most dangerous of all, the competition to him isn't about shiny hardware and bragging rights. It's the simple internal joy of welcoming home birds long before you see a feather. Derek Flowers, Pontypool. I had to check with Gareth a couple times to make sure I'd written the name of our next destination down correctly. Doesn't this look like there's a vowel missing to you? But no, the GPS unit recognized Cumtillery. It's a small mining village deep in a Welsh valley and the scene of one of the most intense pigeon rivalries in Wales, but more on that later. On this damp Welsh morning, we are on our way to the home of Vince Padfield. However, like Derek Flowers' brother, Vince is somewhat camera shy, and we were greeted by his friendly younger brother, Dave, when we arrived. The Padfields have raced from this Welsh valley side for more than 60 years. Father Albert was winning nationals as far back as 51. Back in those days, they often commissioned an oil painting of your winning bird instead of just taking a photograph. Vince and Dave learned at their father's knee, and before he passed away in 2005, the trio had become legends in long-distance events, including winning a car in a race from southern France. Dave is friendly and humble. He's quick to call his brother the natural fancier and give him credit for much of their success, but Dave's sharp too. He built a successful computer company from scratch, and he knows the history of every bird in their loft. The steep hillside may make you feel like a mountain goat, but the steps are worth it when you see the sweeping view of the valley. The basic loft has been much the same for half a century, with an important nesting modification you'll hear about.
This is a new one, yeah. It's been up just a 12-month. And the loft there's been there since late 80s, 90s. But we've extended it, and I'll show you the system we fly. There's actually a corridor behind there, 4-foot corridor, that we added on to fly this roundabout system.
Okay.
And I'll show you. So we got double boxes behind boxes.
Recently, Vince constructed a small loft that's half for stock birds and half for yearlings. We started our tour there, which got us out of the drizzle. Like everyone we met in Wales, Dave confirmed his first goal was to beat his neighbors, but most of all, to beat the Bulldogs.
We can beat the English. That's what we want to do.
Before we went to the main loft, Dave described what's become known as the Padfield method.
And basically, there's 6 weeks on the roundabout where the cock is like a widowwood cock in the front. The hen spends 22 hours a day in the box. Yeah? And she's out for an hour in the morning and an hour in the night. Now, that hen is quite happy in that box. It's a double box. But when we pair them up, they rear a pair of youngsters, and in the box the hen's gonna reside in while she's on the roundabout, she lays her second eggs. So she's sat in there, she's content in there. So we've got food, water, everything on the box because she's in there 22 hours a day.
Wow.
6 weeks, yeah, they have all the racing, and then the last race we send them to before we pair them all up is about 350 mile. We let them in the day before. We normally get a good result that day, and then they come back. Those doors are open then, not today, but generally once they're paired up, they're open from 6 in the morning till 9:30 in the night. Yeah. Another little secret for you in terms of getting those birds conditioned. See these?
Yeah.
These are bulrushes, kept from the waterside. Yeah? I'll show you the nests in the cot. These pigeons, when these doors are open, they fly down, they pick up one of these, do a circuit, and go into the box. Very often they'll just go back and forth, back and forth. Now, taking off and landing in terms of...
Oh, yeah.
It's our own personal gym.
Like other Welsh lofts, the staple food for these long-distance workers is peas and beans. The Old Bird team has hoppers of them at all times. As longer races approach, a high-carb mixture of commercial widowhood feed is added, and that's boosted with high-fat grains in the final week before basketing for the 600-mile stations. For 50 years, the Padfields flew natural. Dave explained why they chose roundabout.
We wanted to try the roundabout because we felt being on the natural right the way through wasn't good in terms of getting a bird to a peak. We need to get our birds to a peak from, say, the 21st of June, the longest day, till the 10th of July. Yeah. Now, if they're on natural, we felt we couldn't, they're stale. The other thing, if they're on natural, you've got to train. And training is hard work, but not only that, the amount of losses with hawks we get is incredible. So it was a combination of combating the need not to train, but still the need to get them fit. Yeah. So that was a combination. And the method we use has been, we think it's been we've been successful in doing that,
And so his idea was, let's have a box.
Let's have a box whereby we can keep the hen in while she's on the roundabout for 22 hours a day. The other 2 hours she's flying. But the other thing is, the hen's content there because she's sat for 10 days her second round of eggs after we've reared the youngsters.
Once they began to have success with roundabout, Vince dreamed up a unique nest box system.
I think we were the first to do it, actually. Can't remember there was nothing before us. And what we did, we put an extra 4 foot on the back of the loft, the length of the loft. And as we go round, I'll show you the box.
Now, that was a serious commitment, though.
It was, yeah. My brother did all the work, and it took him ages, literally ages.
So the Padfield method is roundabout, but not rotating birds from section to section. It's from nest to nest. It's certainly labor-intensive, but very successful. Only a few lofts in Wales have ever won a South Road National more than once from the 600-mile stations, the legendary towns of Pau and Tarbes in France. The Padfields have done it 5 times.
On the way through, we'll pass through the young bird section.
Now we're going to go through into the patented system.
Into the patented system, yeah. And I'll show you the old red cock, if he's still alive.
To get from the roundabout nests in front to the new hallway in back, you pass through the young bird section. The brothers have a team of very calm youngsters that barely moved as we passed through. These birds are expected to fly the channel once in their first season.
It's all in the feathering.
Oh, it's like playing with a silk scarf.
But Dave says they don't care about young bird prizes, just training their heads for the longer work to follow. One trait they do look for in pigeons destined to fly in 2- and 3-day contests is what Dave called the knuckle on the wing. He demonstrated.
You position to the edge of the tail and you can feel the knuckle. Yeah? Now, the knuckle there. Yeah? And that knuckle, the closer it is to the body, the shorter that knuckle is. So basically, to fly the hours, you're looking to go that. If you're going that way, you know, that pigeon's capable of 10 hours perhaps. Yeah? And it's like a joint. If it's a loose joint, it wears. Yeah? So I always look for, you know, most of our pigeons, you go there and then you've got to go to the left.
So
on the knuckle.
there's the joint.
There's the joint. You line it up, and then the more you go to the left, the better in terms of shorter the knuckle.
When we got to the new back hallway, Dave explained how the roundabout hen boxes worked.
When the hens are on the roundabout, they're in these boxes. Yeah. So the box itself has got the gate, so we can shut them off. So they're in there 22 hours a day. They've got food and water, everything in there. They're on grids. They've laid their second egg in a pan behind. This end, the ones here, some are actually still sat behind. See the eggs. They're in a race today at the moment, so that's why the birds are not there. So we have to come through the back, let 40 hens out, push the cocks through. Yeah, get the hens in, let 40 cocks out, push the hens back through. So they always go at the back. When they're on the roundabout, they go at the back, and they always come in the front.
So this.
Can you see it? See the red one, 2/3 of the way down?
Dave told a funny story about one of the Loft's Foundation birds, a 4-time Poe Prize winner, including First National, known officially as Padfield's Perfection. But we came up with another name for this 18-year-old champion.
But I think when he won it, it was about, there was something like 1,200 in the National. Yeah.
4 times in the money.
Yeah. Yeah, and last year, both national winners were grandchildren of this one.
But you don't see a lot of reds here.
No.
He doesn't.
No. We got a few reds.
Red that
Yeah.
is,
Yeah, definitely. And this guy was actually out of not a mispairing. His parents were never paired. We had one red cock in the stock loft. Paired to my original Windmuller hen, and she was paired to a checker cock, and this was in the nest, so we knew it was, and they were never paired.
The bastard son of...
The bastard champion. Yeah, absolutely unbelievable.
These are such tough distance pigeons that Dave's biggest problem with his brother is he is fearless in sending winners back down the road year after year instead of retiring them into the stock loft. The Padfields regularly win with 5 to 7-year-old birds on their race team. And Dave was happy to show the wing injury that would keep this 5-year-old national winner from racing again, no matter how brave Vince wanted to be.
We were talking about racing national winners. This cock's first National Gold Cup winner. And he's going into the stock loft.
And he blew a tire coming home.
He blew a tire coming home. My brother's very disappointed, but I'm not.
When we returned to the house, I was pleased to see Vince had arrived home with our host, Ray Strawbridge. That gave us a chance to talk about coal mining history in the valley, and also for the Padfield brothers to reminisce of the many times over a half-century that a tired champion had steered its way to their loft above the tightly packed homes in this lush Welsh valley. David and Vince Padfield in Cumtillery. We didn't have to fire up the GPS to find the next destination. From Vince Padfield's, it's only 3 rows of houses down to the equally feared team of Priest Brothers and Sons. This quartet of passionate fanciers were a must-see on Gareth's list. He's had to visit Cumtillery several times to record the 13 national wins of brothers Henry and Colin Colin's sons Lee and John. The breeding and racing lofts are an eclectic assortment that take up virtually every square inch of Henry Priest's backyard. The pathway between lofts is 1 man wide. The Priest-Padfield rivalry isn't all that old. Vince was once their partner. And unlike the Padfield's distance exploits, the Preece results are in both young and old birds and at all distances. But they've recently joined the new long distance club here and are setting their sights on catching the Padfields at the 2-day races. All of Wales will follow that chapter. They race cocks and hens on a traditional roundabout system. The males get these boxes most of the time, although the bulk of the team from the 2 sections were away for a race. Normally, the hens are kept in here, with colored balls on the floor to keep them from mating.
I nicked 3 packets of balls off my grandchildren today. But found out then we wanted another bloody 10 packets.
Again, the main feed, local beans. They buy a ton a year. But with the race team, they add in carbs and fats, building them up for the longer races. Their main secret, sunflower hearts, doled out during the week before the race. We squeezed our way from tiny space to space to see their various operations. And even though the entire family's dead serious about racing, they all have a good sense of humor. The biggest laugh I got was when I asked about the careful design scheme of their lofts.
Now, is this a very intricate design, or did this just happen?
We had a boy come here the other week and he said, "Is Emery posh, is it?" And I said, "No, but it'll work."
Oh, yeah.
The young bird and main stock loft are at the bottom of the garden. They raise a first round of 30 youngsters that they darken. Initially, they fly to the perch, but after the stock birds next door raise their 3rd round, they're removed and the young birds take over their nests. Racing young birds to the stock loft nests, the Preeces have won 4 young bird nationals. They somehow keep track of bloodlines from 4 different families, and their birds are a mix of colors. But their recall of data began to make my head hurt. Here's Henry remembering exactly how many losses they had during a test of training methods with their young birds years ago.
We lost an 8 the first race, then a 6. I said, "Oh, bugger this, John, we'd stop training." And we stopped training, we lost a 1, a 2, a none, a 1. And the last race we had 33 out of 34. But
The stockbirds enjoy an outside wire aviary, and to me, the most interesting story here was in this section. Unlike so many champions we visited, the Preeces do not rely principally on the basket to choose their breeders. They've proven to themselves, without a doubt, that prepotent pigeons are often unflown summer late hatches. And that is exactly the key secret in their stock loft. John described how they arrived at this system.
It's like you take the old cock, then the old blue cock that won all the races. He was a Van Lontanian cross. He won 10 first, and then he won 10 duplicate first, like feds and sections in the national and that. When he went to stock, first thing in your mind, because he raced, he was about 4. First in your mind is racing him, innit? To breed, he was going to breed something like yourself, and he never. So we wasted like 3 years breeding out of him and racing every young and he bred, and they never shaped up at all. Maybe 1 or 2 was our average pigeons. But then we thought, well, we never had no grandchildren off him. The first 2 birds that we ever bred off him, out of his children, was 2nd national pair of him. So then we thought, right, we put a son to stock, he bred a national winner. We put the next one to stock, he bred a 2nd national winner. We paired him with his sister and put an hen to stock, and she bred the Queen's Cup winner.
So many of their best breeders have never even seen the outside of the loft. I asked Henry why they didn't settle them just for safety.
Now, this is a simple question, but if you're going to bring a really outstanding bird that's going to come in the stock loft, why wouldn't you settle it? Why wouldn't you let it out a little bit so you wouldn't lose it?
Oh, it's too valuable.
the Hawks down here,
The Hawks are terrible.
they wouldn't get 10 yards.
John made an excellent point about the logic of what I called his brave approach.
This cock is, well, he's getting on a bit now, but he's like our #1 Danian producer at the moment. He never raced. His father never raced. His father never raced. But each generation produced a real top stock pigeon. Like his grandfather was outstanding stock pigeon, so we had a son of him.
But it takes a lot of courage to use your stock loft with things that look good to you as opposed to what the basket is showing.
Yeah, but they don't cost you anything. It's easy to get rid of them, isn't it?
Colin and Ray came and pulled us away for tea. It was impossible to get a word in edgewise as everyone remembered birds and races and stories from the past. And while I was hoping for a story of a big family rivalry like America's Hatfields and McCoys, The Padfield-Priest rivalry is based on a great deal of respect.
Up to a certain distance,
Out-
you can keep up. But
Oh, aye. Up to 550, we can keep up with Vince. But 600 mile, there's no bugger in Wales is as good as him. Nobody in Wales is as good as him. Consistently, I mean. You're in, you're in, you're in, you're in.
John also spoke admiringly about his competitors in their local club.
The old club is the same, mate. Our club is a friendly club, but they want to, and we go out drinking every Friday. There's a gang of us, but they all want to beat each other.
But Henry said it best earlier when I asked about going after Vince at the distance.
We tried to breed a lot more long distance ones this year, like 600 mile.
You want to try to keep up with Vince up there?
well, that's the point.
That's right.
I mean, this is like the best. It looks like this neighborhood's got the toughest rivalry in the
You ought to
world.
swap. You ought to have some of our blues, and we have some of his pints.
He's my best friend, but I want to beat his arse off.
Later, Colin took us up on the hillside, and I got to look out at some of the humble Welsh miners' homes and lofts I've described to the world in so many of our documentaries. It made me feel good to know that in spite of smaller numbers, the passion for pigeons in these misty valleys is still there, and fanatical but friendly rivals like the Padfields and Priests will be watching these skies to see whose bird is first home from the great long-distance events. Priest brothers and sons, come Tillery. While Gareth made the list of fanciers he recommended we visit, it was often our host Ray Strawbridge who accompanied us when we did. And I was pleased when we had a chance to spend time visiting Ray's own loft, this time with Gareth in tow. Ray and his dad were flying the North Road from Lerwick more than 30 years ago, and Ray's a tried and true distance man. When the Welsh organizations chopped the number of long-distance events, Ray, with support from Gareth, founded the Gwent Greater Distance Club. This new Welsh group then aligned with the British International Champion Club, the BIC as they call it, and now ships birds on the South Road to southern France and Barcelona. Created with just over a dozen fanciers, the membership has jumped fourfold in a few years. The ultimate dream, seeing a Welsh pigeon win an international. A decade ago, the Continentals would have called it a fairy tale, but the stunning trio of English wins in 2011 means Ray and Gareth's dream could come true. Winning Barcelona into Wales would indeed conquer the final frontier. Our visit here was something of a farewell tour for Ray. He and his wife have moved to their son's spacious new farmhouse to help care for a new grandson, and Ray is building a fascinating new loft there and leaving these behind. Ray says he loves long-distance racing for the simple reason that it's the bird, not the system, that wins.
You could set your watch at some of the races on the North Road at one time. And you say they'd take an hour, hour and a half, whatever the wind was, and bang, they'd be there straight away. At one time, you could lock your shed up, send 20 birds, have 20 birds here within a half hour, and lock your shed up and go down the club for a pint. But
that doesn't float your boat.
no, no. I don't know. I just like to get those pigeons, you know, more for the pigeon. It's harder to get a team of distance pigeons than sprinters. I think it's more down to the fancier on the sprint, the middle distance, and not the pigeon. On the long distance is the pigeon. You've got to get them.
Ray created a relatively open loft in part to reduce dust on his own lungs, but also because late summer distance birds don't need artificial heat to come into form. Ray says he learned a lot from his father over the decades. A simple example, the best way to pick up a bird.
Then he said, like when I was a boy, like always approach a pigeon when you're on a perch, you want to pick it up. You flatten your hand underneath it and then come in up. And a pigeon, and as a young boy, I can always remember the very first time I done it. And the pigeon will look down at that hand and he'll watch it coming up. And if it's slow, it seems to, hypnotise it for a while. And then you can put your hand underneath and pick him up. Even if they're wild, after a while they just get used to it. And it seems to just calm them down as long as it's not a quick movement. And you pick them up.
When we visited, Ray was only weeks away from beginning to settle these pigeons in their new home. He's moved lofts 6 times over the years, and he described the boomerang method he'll use to get the birds to accept their new home.
All these pigeons I'll settle within 4 to 5 days. But we call it a boomerang system. I don't know if I moved 6 times or 7 times now. But what we do, normally I'll take this shed with me. This will be the first time that I haven't taken the loft with me, this loft. What I normally do is, a week before I take the loft down, I'll take the birds up in the baskets. And I'll let them out at the new area, even without the loft there, and leave them in the baskets for about half hour, and then let them out. And I'll do that twice a day for 4 or 5 days. Then we put the birds in the basket, take the loft down, get a gang of the members, you know, with the friends. Keep him over the night till the new loft is in the baskets. We'll wreck the loft, put him in there the following morning, and then in the night then just let him out. And that's it. And then what you do then, the birds that comes back down the old loft, we always leave like a little shed down there that if any birds do come back, you know, they'll go into, but we let them out the following day. We leave a mower, and you go down the old address, any birds that's there, get them in, make sure there's no corn or water there. Get them in, you take them back home to the new loft, to the newer location. Do it exactly the same again in the afternoon. Wait for an hour, go down, put them back, take them back, and then the following day do exactly the same. Then on the third day, you let them out. If there's any birds go back, which is very rare for the pigeons to go back on the third morning, but any that do, you collect them, shut that loft or take it down or any shed that's down there in the old address. And in the afternoon let them out and that's finished. You never bothered to go down again. And I've done it. I've actually gone down, moved in March, April. They just play around here. March and April. And won races the same year. Yeah. They call it the boomerang system, like the army used to do it all.
We noticed that he likes to use cat litter both on his feed trays and in his old clay nest pots.
Those are pans
Thursday.
like your dad used to have,
Yeah,
right?
no, that's a pair of youngsters have been bred in there. Look at it, look how clean that is.
Yeah.
And I just took the youngsters out.
Pans, this is what I think of as old Welsh racing.
Yeah, yeah,
right.
Yeah, the better than all the plastic pans. These old clay ones. They're
Just don't
brilliant.
drop them on a pigeon or you'll end up you'll be flatter than a pancake.
But that's why you use this cat litter. There's a pair of youngers been
Two youngsters in it, and you haven't cleaned this bowl.
No.
Last year was a fantastic one at the distance for Ray. Marie is named after his wife. Flown on Roundabout early in the 09 season, she took first club from Perpignan feeding a small youngster. Last year, she won the section, flying the final 300 miles into a westerly headwind. Little Marie was the pigeon flying to the most westerly loft of all the birds in the International. Tough pigeons.
And one second, yeah. Well, small to medium, yeah. But when I knows when she's ready because the way I feed on the fat she'll build right up. But it's not when you hear widower boys say this like a balloon, the feel of them. But the way I feed, they get more of a solid feel on them.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, but she'll fill right out then. She will. It'll be an entirely different pigeon. As I said, she's got 2 babies in her now at the moment, but she's an outstanding racer. You can guarantee her from once she gets around about 500 miles, you can guarantee her.
Can you get in there to get her? She's got 2 youngsters, and then she's busy with those eggs. And here is the Welsh
beans.
Welsh secret long distance ingredient.
Let's stop right here. Beans again. We haven't talked much about feeding in this film because if we showed you everything they give in Germany or Belgium, it would take forever and be very confusing. But since Ray is the last Welsh visit and we keep finding these rascals in the great long distance lofts, let me explain. Gareth sent me the common names for the grains Welsh fanciers are using. Here they are. They may have different market names in your country, but here's the scientific name for tick beans. They're all part of the Leguminosae family of plants. Legumes. They're also called faba, horse, or broad beans. The dark color of these Maris tick beans has to do with the age of the beans. They get darker over time, and some fanciers believe they become easier to digest too. Okay, and now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Ingredient.
The protein-rich legumes raise hardy youngsters. But remember, all the distance men go to carbo loading and then fat loading before the big races.
That's the only time I take their beans out the hopper is when 5 days before they go away to a race, where I'll put a maize in it.
So 5 days before the race.
I'll take the hopper of beans away.
No more beans.
No more beans. They'll go on a
Hopper
hopper
a lot of corn.
Yeah, they've got a hopper of maize. And then I give them their sweet mixes all fed in the boxes, the very high fat.
For 2 days, couple days.
I'll start on the fourth day building them up. For the last 2 days, as much as I can get into them.
So you got pretty much a very high protein diet.
And then switched from
Goes to
carbohydrate
carbohydrates.
and fat.
Fats for the last 3
Yeah,
days,
yeah.
4 days.
Yeah, especially the last 2 days. And I'll come up. I couldn't do it when I was working, but I used to have, when my father and my mum was, but what I do then, every hour come up with the feed and feed them in their boxes. I say, we'll call them, they'll just go to their box for the sweet mix. And that's the only time they have it. Well, everybody should know that there's a carbohydrate is used up first, so when the pigeons are reared up, then is the fats. And the longer the fats last, is, they won't go on to, drain their last resource, which is protein, which they'll take out of the tissue, muscle, organs, and that's what finishes them then. They won't come then. When they're on that, they'll only go for a while. That's why they're so important, the fat feed.
Ray's sweet mix, like Dennis Ford's trapping mix,
I used to put
is
a lot of,
basically pigeon candy.
But the only thing that's missing out there is the hemp. I haven't added no hemp with because I'm not racing them, so it's not pointless giving it to them.
So the only thing, if you were racing them, there would be hemp seed in here that you would add yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mind you, the last feed when they go away would be, the night before I basket, would be all hemp and safflower, as much as they would eat, and peanuts.
Ray put a little down and I was almost trampled in the rush.
That's all it is. And they're upper fed, but for this they'll come to you anyway.
Okay. Who wants to get it out of the spoon? Come on, be brave. There you go. There you go, guys. Spoon-fed long-distance Welsh pigeon.
So if you want to, pardon the pun, give peas a chance, remember carbs and fats form an essential part of this long-distance system. Ray easily caught another of his small birds who do so well in 2-day races, Tom Thumb, who won the section from Barcelona last year.
Now, how do you end up as Tom Thumb?
But when I took the birds from the Gwent Great Editions, the marking station for the International, to Southampton marking station. But the secretary didn't have no double rubbers down there from the BICC secretary. So he said you'll have to take them to Ash. I thought, oh God. He said, no, you haven't got to do it. He said, I've spoken to the secretary. He said, pay us the money. And he said, we'll take the birds up, we'll put them in the baskets, cocks and hens, and we'll ring and put the rubbers on up there. You can pay here. So I said, yeah, okay, then we'll do that. And while I was paying the money, getting the sheets done, I come out and they was putting him in a hen basket. And he wants another peanut.
Snagged a peanut
Yeah,
right away.
yeah.
Let's see if it goes for another peanut.
You know what they want, don't they?
Tom Thumb loves
and that's,
peanut.
I said, what are you doing with that? He said, oh, put in the end basket. I said, don't do that. I said, he'd be shagged out by the time they let him go in Barcelona. He said, Annie? I said, no, it's a cock. And he said, oh, and he said, bloody hell, it's Tom Thumb. And that's how he got his name. I said, I'll clock at Tom Thumb, I said, from Barcelona, and that's the one to come. He was first Gwent Great Editions, first section.
Now, if Ray's helped you understand this traditional Old Welsh feeding system, our next stop is anything but traditional. The fascinating new loft he's built on his son Ray Jr.'s farm. Next to the large country home they all share is the new 2-story structure Ray will race from in the years ahead. It's literally a huge open box of a loft. To avoid dust and give his birds maximum fresh air, Ray designed a loft with open floors, mostly wire walls, and an open ceiling. It'll be fascinating to know how well he does using this radical approach. The stock section is on the east end with large wire-floored nests. In the center will be a section for roundabout cockbirds and hens using the clever back-to-back nest box system Vince Padfield created. On the west end is a young bird section where a few youngsters had already been settled. And later, Ray sent me pictures after I got back to Montana. It's a radical idea, this open loft in the damp Welsh climate. It's more like a loft you'd see in Thailand or another tropical country. But years ago, before widowhood and temperature control came to the fore, open front English lofts were common, as were hoppers full of beans. So we'll have to see what a great long-distance man like Ray Strawbridge can do from here. As Ray said earlier, maybe he's got to go back 30 years to go forward. The motto of the new Welsh Long Distance Club is very appropriate.
What's the motto of the club?
Only the brave.
Only the brave.
Yeah, only the brave. Yeah.
Only the brave. It takes brave fanciers to ship and very brave pigeons to fight the prevailing headwinds of the great international contests from the continent. Only the Brave certainly captures the spirit of the fellows we met here as they support a new era of distance racing. Each of these lofts are worthy of their own film, much less these all too brief visits. But I hope you catch the sense of pride and competence that these individuals and entire families bring to the sport here in the land of the Red Dragon. Great pigeon fanciers all. Wales was a delight to visit. For our final destination, we're again in the southern portion of an ancient land that's better known for its northern pigeon men. This one just a ferry ride from our friends in Wales. In Ireland's case, I've visited several times before to visit legendary Ronnie Williamson for programs in our earlier series. I'd even flown into Dublin before with Frank Tasker, but it was only to drive north across the border toward Belfast. This would be my first extended stay in the Irish Republic. I've mentioned before how challenging it is for Irish pigeons to tackle not just the English Channel, but the Irish Sea. I still marvel at those that do and the trainers that can bring them home. However, in the visits you'll take with me next, you'll learn that many top Irish trainers today think the stakes have become simply too high. That those 60 miles of windswept waves are too often a watery grave for good, even great pigeons. This reality has led to Dublin becoming a hotbed for short-distance events with huge birdages. It's a fun story, and I know you'll enjoy meeting some of the nice folks we tracked down in and near Dublin, our final stop on this exploration of the pigeon universe. Welcome to Dublin, capital of a commonwealth that wrestled itself away from English rule almost a century ago. The northern sixth of Ireland, home to Belfast, remains part of the Queen's domain, but here in the south, the Republic of Ireland has cast its lot independently in the European Union. For a while, things were going great. Dublin boasts new freeways, bridges, airport terminals, and a slew of other construction projects that were part of what they called the Irish Miracle. But like the bad loans that popped the American housing bubble, the miracle turned out to be an economic mirage, and things are tough here. However, as in Belfast, where the troubles of decades ago never delayed a pigeon race, the resilient Irish fanciers down south are still as mad for their pigeons as ever. This film begins and ends in Dublin. It's the hub for Ryanair, an inexpensive airline I've used often because it serves many of the smaller towns I want to reach in Europe. I'd flown here in early June and spent a day with Keith and Christy Brennan, mutual friends of mine and Frank Tasker. Over the years, this father and son flying together and solo have racked up significant performances in Dublin, but they're among my more humble friends and said point blank they wouldn't help me unless I promised not to make a big deal of their performances. That said, I'll let you draw your own conclusions. When we first talked, both Brennan said only one name came immediately to mind. After that, they wanted to ask around to get a consensus. We'll get to the story of that one name later, but suffice to say that by the time we flew back into Dublin from Wales, they'd managed to flesh out the list. Dublin's main racing group is the Irish South Road Federation, and we attended a shipping night at one of its large clubs shortly after we arrived. Some 600 lofts are part of this fed. It's the largest in the country, and they often ship from 7,000 to 11,000 pigeons a week. The birds going into these crates were on their way to the French port city of St. Malo. However, as its name implies, the bulk of the action in this fed is inland races from the southern extremes of the country back up to Dublin. As I was to learn, as much as I yearned to be poetic about birds braving both the Channel and the fearful Irish Sea, Dublin is really a sprinter's paradise. Given a choice, many of the most experienced fanciers here, many second-generation pigeon men, now send few, if any, birds across the water. That wasn't quite the story I thought I'd get here in Ireland, so I went to visit Henry Byrne, who I met at shipping night. Henry's the head of the South Road Fed, and the fact he also runs a large feed store and is a partner in a breeding operation made me think he'd probably be able to explain what was the name of the game here. Now, if you think my job is cool, I sort of like the idea of owning a feed store with a big new pigeon loft above it you can visit all day and spend time with the fancy bloodlines you and your partner have brought to town. That's a pretty cool gig. We took in the sweeping view of Dublin Airport in the distance, and I asked Henry to describe the local competition and what drives the growth of inland racing.
We have two distinct programs. We have a program for inland racing up to 200 miles, and then we race on the channel from the UK and France. Now, there are a lot of people who would prefer just to race up the land. Like, I'm convinced that if we could get 400 or 500 miles on the land, then there'll be very few people would send on the channel. Because the channel racing into Dublin, I don't know, it seems to be, it's either something geographical or there's something seriously wrong with the numbers of pigeons that we get back. Because on a good day, now if you're talking about a really good day on the channel, this is only from 120 miles. You're talking about 50% returns, which to me, as a pigeon fancier, is ludicrous. But that's the kind of racing that some people want. They want to be able to say they clocked out these. I'm fair. That's okay. That's their prerogative, you know. They want to do that kind of racing and they're prepared to take the losses. Let them walk away with it. It's not my idea of pigeon racing. Now, I'll send to these races. Don't get me wrong, I will send to them. But I certainly wouldn't send a pigeon that wins repeatedly up the land on the channel. No chance.
And as much as he appreciates birds from the continent, Henry has a lot of respect for the lofts he competes against.
I think there would be 20, 25 pigeon fanciers in Dublin that would compete at the highest level. You put them anywhere. No problem. Absolutely no problem. And I'm talking about racing against the best fanciers in Europe.
Henry's loft is a dream operation. Each nest box is accessible from two sides, so hens can easily be put into their nests without ever having to enter the main loft. The Sputniks are the popular new slope design. His youngsters were wheeling around as we talked and then came piling in when he called them. Hanging out in a feed store to meet pigeon men is a little like waiting in a donut shop if you want to talk to policemen. Among the most notable who happened by was Christy Keogh, a winner of All Ireland's coveted Miller Gold Cup, honoring the first pigeon clocked from France. Christy endorsed what Henry said about why even victors like himself have to think hard about channel racing.
Because we have one of the hardest channels to cross. That's the reason. Coming from France, our boards have to come negotiate the English Channel, the Bristol Channel and the Irish Sea to come home. And it's a long journey.
Christy also explained why he thinks Dublin isn't on the pigeon world's radar.
The publicity we get in Ireland, in Dublin, is very limited. We've no scribes as such, and so it's not highlighted enough. Like in England and all Wales and all, they have their scribes. You see it, get the RP and the British Homeworld every week. You see the pigeons and they're on the front page. Well, we don't have that here, unfortunately. We don't get that.
Mr. Keogh also remarked on the recent growth in local competition.
When I started, oh my God, it'd be about 200 in the club. Oh, say 200 pigeons maybe. Now, at the moment now, you could get 600.
As we were to hear over and over, he told how raptors are becoming the ruination of many Irish racing teams.
You go down the road and in a 10-mile radius, if you stop your car watch, you might count 15, 16 hawks. I won't train any more than 10 miles myself, because I train on my own. I'd be afraid to go any further, because the thoughts of going that other 5 miles up the road, I know I'm going to get.
How does that compare when you were?
Oh, there was nothing like that. No, nothing like that.
A fancier for only half a century, I asked him his age.
I'm 72 next birthday.
So you're just getting started?
Just getting started.
So with that information about the intense short-distance inland racing here, I hope you realize this segment may be a good balance to many of those Welshmen you met who fantasize about winning an international long-distance race. Here, along the southern shores of the Emerald Isle, it is the longest leap across the sea to landfall in Cornwall. As you'll hear, It's also a leap of faith some very good fanciers are no longer willing to make. While the stamina of pigeons in Dublin is part of our story, the legendary Irish stamina of some of the trainers is worth noting as well. And they don't get much tougher than Pad Byrne, who we met on our first day of visits in Ireland. Pad's been flying for over 50 years. Behind his quiet row house in a Dublin neighborhood is a backyard of wall-to-wall pigeon lofts. From here, he's managed to win virtually every major prize in his federation, and for the last 10 years has done so in spite of being a kidney transplant survivor. I'd call that being pretty tough. We were getting plenty of Dublin showers during our visit, so we huddled in the top floor of his 2-story widowhood loft to talk to Pad about the nature of racing here in Dublin. There's one way to get this Irishman's attention: beat him. That's how he first decided to convert to widowhood.
Well, as a friend of mine lives across the way, and he was racing 5 boards one day. And I had my old team, and I had this blue-pied cock. He was in super form, and I had him pulled and declared to win. I had everything on him, right? And I seen the boards dropping in like stones into my friend across the way, and they're a sign of a board for me. And I said, "What are you doing?" "I have them on widowhood." I said, "What's that?" He says, "I have them on widowhood to keep the hens away." I said, "I'm going to start that." You have to change, like, I mean, you have to compete with people, you know? And that's how I started, really.
Pad keeps a team of 24 widowhood cocks, and he's dabbling with roundabout. His birds were incredibly calm, including this guy who did well in his last outing.
As I said, like, the day he came, he hit the board straight out of the sky. And I knew he was a good one because I never seen a trap like it, you know. If I could get that every week, I'd be a happy man, you know. But he was fifth federation, you know. I think there was about 10,000 boards that day.
For Pad, the pigeon sport is not dying. If anything, it's getting more competitive here.
There's a new generation of lads, like, you know, I'm one of the oldest, like, you know. There's maybe 10 around my age. But then we have a new generation, lads about 35 to 40. They're very competitive now, you know, and look, you want to see them, they can't get enough in. I was like that years ago myself.
And he faces competition that's about as intense as you'll find anywhere in Europe. Races decided by seconds.
We have a radius. Now we have 60 members, right? And we have a radius of 2 miles. Now you can imagine on a Saturday, if you lose 10 seconds with a pigeon on a Saturday, he's gone down the sheet.
Pad reiterated why many of Dublin's top pigeon men now devote themselves to short-distance flying. It's simply too hard to send your best east across the Irish Sea.
There's about 60 miles of open water. Now I believe boards coming into Ireland, there's no one else has so much water to fly across, only the Irish boards, right? But they have to get down low. They can't fly high with the west wind or you know, when it's on their nose. So they're trying to hug the waves to keep out of the wind. And that's where every 6 or 7 wave comes up and takes a lot of them out of the sky, you know. They lose a lot of boards, but I admire the lads that race the channel, you know. And we race them myself, but it's the only reason I race them when I'm overstocked. I'll put boards that I can afford to lose. I won't put up the best ones I have. I'll keep the best ones here.
The rogue wave theory is no urban legend, according to Pad. He's met people who've been riding the ferry to Dublin and seen birds snatched from the sky by the water. So he concentrates primarily on inland racing out to about 200 miles.
Now what I do, I wouldn't send any of them across the Penzance. They're strictly for the inland. If they prove to me that they're racing up the land, they don't go across the water. I might try an odd one.
We took a break for tea and I took a look at club results, and I realized Pad hasn't done himself any favors in terms of eliminating competition. He's bred his greatest rivals, with 2 more Byrne sons fighting him for top honors. Each week the Byrne name is somewhere near the top of the results. Sometimes it's Mr. and Mrs. P. Byrne, or son Pat and family, or son Tony, just a few seconds separating all of them.
Byrne, 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 Byrne.
We then visited his youngbird loft, almost too dark for video. When he had a great youngbird season several years ago, some visitors congratulated him on trying the new system called darkening. Pat said it was news to him.
There's a few top fanciers came one year, and I was flying exceptionally well with the young birds, and they said to me, "You're flying the darkness system." I said, "No, I'm not." So they looked at me and they said, "You must be flying the darkness system to fly young birds like this." I said, "No, I'm not." He says, "Well..."
They were naturally darkened?
Yeah, naturally.
He also showed the simple system he uses to load his youngsters for training, and it made me remember to show you these shipping crates. They're more and more popular in the UK and Ireland, but you don't see them much in other countries. I took photos of new ones at Burns Feed Store too. With a sliding in section and translucent plastic sides, plus a sliding top, they're about as simple, light, and efficient as any crate I've seen.
I think he's putting on darkness for years and he didn't know. Yeah.
Back in the widowhood loft, I asked Pat about his racing record. But past victories don't mean much. Transplant or no, he's focused on winning tomorrow.
No, I don't think about the year gone, the week gone. Last week I was 2nd, 5th, 11th, and I was 9th on the channel. But I don't dwell on that. I'm thinking about next week. And I don't think, when the year is over, I don't think about last year, I'm thinking about this year. You know what I mean? That's the way I operate.
So after 50 seasons and a major transplant, what's on his mind? Roundabout hens. One of his sons has been beating him with the girls, and that just won't do.
As I said, the son now this year, he's won 3 races with hens. And he's without cocks are not doing it for him. It's the hens are doing it. You know, and a lot of lads are looking at the sheets, hey, another hen, you know. So you're going to see next year there'll be more fellas racing hens, you know. It changes every 10 years, I think, you know, but you have to keep up with it.
And probably his favorite story is on an old friend in his club who thought his transplant would sideline this tough Irish flyer.
Unfortunately, I don't have the energy, you know. But carrying a crate up now and taking them hens out, that kills me, you know. You know. Where years ago, it wouldn't bother me years ago, you know.
Well, not. How many fed averages, or how many club averages have you won since you had a kidney transplant?
Well, I won everything in 07. And last year then was up there again. As I said, I don't think about it, you know what I mean? But I've been there nearly every year since I got the kidney transplant, you know. And the secretary of the club, Tucker, he was telling everyone, he won't win anything again, he's finished, you know. But he told me, he says, you was telling everyone, you made it fucking easy, he says.
Pat Byrne, Dublin. I asked Keith and his friends to suggest some lofts outside of Dublin so we'd have more variety than just the city. And that sent us on a journey south through the lush green Irish hills to the town of Arklow. There, an energetic young fancier named Sheldon Leonard has established a new feed store and breeding facility. Sheldon's a close friend and disciple of the legendary André Rudhoff, the 63-year-old manager of Natural Grains breeding stud in Belgium and many-time champion in the Antwerp Union. So it was only natural, if you'll pardon the pun, that Sheldon decided to carry this brand of feed exclusively when he started the store. Now, before he got into the pigeon game full-time, Sheldon owned a construction and development company. He began as a teenage carpenter's assistant and enjoyed the boom times of the Irish Miracle. For many fanciers in the region, the store saves a 100-mile round trip to Dublin and is also a nice gathering place. They have a popular weekly sprint race just for customers. I was pleased to see their film library plays constantly in the area where fanciers swap lies, and it included some of our films. Sheldon briefed me on the local and national races and confirmed what Pat Byrne said about the danger of the Irish Sea.
He's seen, the pigeons down so low when they're in the headwind on the ocean.
Yeah.
That they're literally trying to follow the waves, and then
and they can be taken by a wave. Yeah, they're gone. I've seen it. Yeah. I've been on the ferry and seen it. It's scary.
It isn't until you see them nicely displayed that you realize the mind-boggling variety of grain we're all supposed to keep track of. As I looked at the prices, I couldn't help but think of my friends in Wales packing their pigeons with cheap peas by the ton. Sheldon showed us the variety of other gadgets that he sells in the store, such as a drinker designed to get youngsters to learn where the water is, and a variety of feeders, nests, and other gadgets for the fancier who wants everything.
Yeah, these are Irish made.
Yeah, they're made by a fancier in the club. Just squeeze.
Oh. Oh, okay. That's really
So what you do is you lock them in, Jim, till they've coupled, and it's guaranteed parentage.
Right. About 22 inches deep. So it's basically a 2 by 2, about 8 cubic feet. These are very simple. This is just routed out.
After touring the store, we followed Sheldon through Arklow to his home where he lives with his wife and 2 small children on the south side of this coastal river town. Founded by the Vikings who sailed to the river mouth in the 900s, it's far enough from Dublin that they have their own federation to race their pigeons. Sheldon was apparently savvy enough to see the economic downturn coming. He exited the developer's world and invested in the feed store and a beautiful loft and expensive breeding stock, including Rudhoff's famous Iceman line of pigeons. A central idea was there are almost no openings on the outside of the building. Following Andre's advice, Sheldon created a vented roof augmented with mechanical fans.
But if you listen, you also have mechanical ventilation.
The L shape creates a nice central area. The punching bag is for when a bird is slow to trap, I guess. And there's a feed room and a bathroom. One idea I thought was handy was his use of wall-mounted hopper feeders. A clear section indicates how much grain is in the hopper, and the perch and small dispenser area limits how much grain is wasted. He combines these with automatic waters and says he can leave the entire loft for a few days if he wants.
You can how many kilograms can you get into one of those?
25 as well.
So you put a sack of feed in there, and this is an automatic.
Yeah, drinker.
I doubt if you go away for it. You don't go and leave them for a couple of weeks, but you could.
Yeah. In the winter, I'd be in Belgium every 2 weeks.
The stock birds self-regulate how often they feed their youngsters, and the youngsters we saw can best be described as fat and happy.
I never see them feeding them.
The feed and water system combined with automatic cleaning is a fancier's dream. Sheldon planned to race his young birds on the sliding door method with straw on the floor, and he described a new twist with light and dark that he'd just learned from Belgian friends.
So to go back, it's a new thing relatively.
Yeah.
I know several lofts in Belgium that's doing it with huge success, and they've no problems.
To summarize it, they've been on the dark.
Yeah.
Today we are actually the middle of summer, it's June
Yeah.
21st. And they will now be they will go to a light day. You're going to make sure they stay with the right amount of light.
Yeah, we retain, we've the time system here.
Okay. So they're going to start getting 15 hours of light, even when sunset and sunset are different. Sunrise and sunset are different.
And this system here keeps moonlight as well. So it keeps a little flicker on the bulbs and actually gives the effect of moonlight in the loft for the youngsters. It's a German system.
So they'll be on that summer system.
Yeah.
Through the first of the young bird season, you said you had about 13 young bird? No, how many events are they going to?
Maybe 10.
10 young bird races.
Yeah.
So the first 6 or so, they're on 15 hours of light.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, 3 weeks before the Young Bird National, they wake up one morning and it's winter again.
Yeah.
I mean, they go from 15 hours of light to 9 hours of light in a day.
Yeah.
They never even hit the brakes.
Takes them a few days to adjust.
But then they just locks everything in
and
everything stops.
after about maybe 15, 16 days, probably the Tuesday before the Saturday race on the 3rd week, to get the lights 24 hours. So they wake up one morning, it's back summer. And the youngsters are electric that week. They're in real good condition.
The system worked well for him, and he later sent me photos of young birds that scored club and fed prizes using the boosted light concept. Sheldon has an enormous investment in the stock birds here. He's acquired birds from Andre, the Jansen brothers, and Freddie and Jacques Van de Heede, among others. His stock pairs will raise 6 nests a year, and he keeps relatively few for himself. So, by all appearances, the breeding division is holding its own against the feed store. The palatial loft would be the envy of any pigeon person. It boasts all the cool gadgets you could ask for: temperature control, skylights, auto cleaning, adjustable ventilation, clever German nest fronts, you name it, it's here. But Sheldon spent over a year of his own time building it and waited more than a year before putting birds in here. so he certainly has sweat equity in what you see.
Dealing with
Two interesting sidelights include the Figurito pigeons Sheldon uses as droppers, again from Rudhoft. He demonstrated how he can throw them as high as possible in the air and they spiral down to the landing board. And getting birds to trap in a hurry is important here. A mile across open country is a quarry where more than a dozen peregrine falcons make their nest. It's a pigeon man's nightmare, and they've cost him a lot of good birds. To keep them away, he uses eagle owl statues on his house and the recorded call of these birds to scare the falcons. He believes it helps. Following Rudhoft's advice has paid off for this young fancier. He has a nice display of Irish crystal, the preferred form of trophies in this part of the world that's so famous for its cut glass. And sometimes turning your hobby into your job can be a mistake. But Sheldon is happy with how things are going. He's especially proud of the building he created with good advice and his own hard work.
Basically, the loft is designed much the same as Rudhoft's own loft. So,
the King of Antwerp.
The King of Antwerp, when it was finished, he walked around it once. He says, that's good enough. He says, it's perfect.
Sheldon Leonard, Universal Lofts, Arklow. After leaving Arklow's palatial pigeon palace, I was ready for a little more middle-of-the-road fare, I guess, as we headed north back up the coast to Dublin. Both Sheldon and Keith had recommended we meet a father and son team who fly as Cool Lofts and do exceptionally well in Ireland's East Coast Federation. This group competes between Dublin's South Road Fed and Leonard's South Leinster Fed. It includes over 300 lofts and ships up to 600 pigeons in a race. Now, you know you're dealing with serious pigeon men when every available inch of real estate is covered with pigeon lofts, and the Eric Kennedys are certainly that.
This is really spacious here, eh?
Yeah, and every photo you can get.
Sometimes a film crew showing up can fluster folks a little bit, and I got a chance to tease young Eric.
Yeah.
So how old are you?
33. 33.
33. Eric, how about you?
How old am I? 54.
I can see you guys do everything together. How old am I? I don't know. Ask my dad.
Both the Kennedys have a good sense of humor, but they've done some serious winning from this set of backyard lofts. Let me set the scene. On the right are the Old Bird Racing Lofts, roundabout hens on the far right. In the center are several sections for stock birds, then a small garden shed for feed, and finally the young bird loft we saw coming in that extends out towards the driveway. Eric Sr. has been racing for many years and is a real student of the game. He believes strongly that a pigeon loft has an ideal carrying capacity. In a space where most fanciers would keep 60 hens, he's keeping less than 30. The lofts are tidy, with graded floors that are cleaned out once a week. Eric also designed this hen loft so he could darken his hen old bird team from March 21st on, which yielded great results in the early races from mid-April to mid-May.
Are you giving them any auxiliary light?
No, nothing.
So at 6 at night, this comes down.
Yeah. And
9 in the morning, then 9 in the morning, they get some light, they're out for an hour.
Out for an hour, back in.
And they come back in, they trap
here.
down through
Yeah.
here. And they never see that there's no roundabout going on.
No,
They're flying right into here on
In here all the time. The only time they get into the cocks is on the race day.
From here they race from 80 miles to 400 miles, but their passion is the shorter events. In the last few years, they've scored 30 Federation first and second prizes and have been equally successful with old cocks and hens. There's very limited access for air in the racing loft. Eric counts on the open tile roof to vent. His prescription for a hen who gets broody is to put her in a box to cool off.
The idea is that these hens, if they get, would you call them flirty? No.
Flirty, yeah.
Flirty. If they get a little flirty,
Yeah.
he can
box them.
He can put them in there and let them to. That's kind of the cooling off box like they
That's
have
it.
in the hockey.
That's right.
Right.
And it keeps them in the loft. Some people take them out of the loft, but I'd rather leave them in the loft.
That's a very good observation.
Between the race lofts is a simple aviary that they use every basketing day.
Now, the hens and the cocks, every Friday, they bat there. That's the only time they're in there.
On Friday,
Yeah.
before they're going to get basketed.
Yeah.
the girls come in here.
Yes.
The cocks come out here, and everybody has a bath.
No, they're separate. They're
There's a
separate.
hot tub here.
No, they're
Okay.
separate.
Separate.
The hens will come out for an hour, have a bath. Go back in, then the cocks will come out for an hour, have a bath.
In the cockbird section, the Kennedys again show wonderful restraint in keeping their numbers down. But Eric says he learned this the hard way.
One year you had 30 cocks maximum
Yes.
in all these boxes, out
Yes.
of 60 boxes.
Yes.
You had a great season.
Yeah.
And you said,
We won.
to Eric Jr., let's double down.
That's right.
Let's get 60. We got great yearlings. Let's put them in there.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's
That's
rock and
right.
roll. Then what happened?
The year we had the 30, I think we won 8 of the 12 races. And topped the Fed, I just can't remember. And then the following year we went up to the 64 and we were losing them hand over fist. So I said, that's the end of that.
They were kind of helping you find the carrying
They were.
capacity.
I think a loft will find its own level.
Mm-hmm.
We have a young bird loft there, and I've been putting 50 young birds in it. And every season, that drops to 36, 38 young birds. Now I don't do that anymore, Jim. I put 40 young birds in it.
Start with 38, you
Yeah.
get to 37.
And that happened all the time.
It's
So
phenomenal.
the loft tells you.
During the race season, they only give grit on Sundays.
But the stock birds get grit every day. But the race pigeons don't. I don't want them getting too salty and drinking too much water.
When I asked them to share a story they thought would be informative for newcomers, Eric talked about how critical it is to watch the behavior in your cockbirds, especially when you're picking your pool pigeon.
The cock in the end section, which I'll show you, last week he decided he wanted that. About 2 weeks ago, he decided he wanted that box. So I was watching him. So I closed the box and he was landing, he's out of the end section down there, he was landing on here.
This is an interloper.
Yeah,
He's decided he's going to try to take it over.
yes, this other guy in here,
Okay.
he decided he wasn't just happy with that, he wanted that. So what I done was then I took him out and I opened the box. So he decided he wanted that. He didn't know which box he wanted. So I was actually standing here and he was flying from there to there and then lift off the ground. He'd fly 1 foot all the way down the loft at the end and land. He'd fly 1 foot all the way back up and land. So I was watching this. So I pulled him and I DTW him, which declared the win. And of course, he won the race and topped the Fed.
He topped the Fed.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful territory
That's what he done.
story.
Just 1 foot all the way along.
So, this you saw 2 weeks ago, a
Yeah.
pigeon that had been parked around the
There
corner.
he is there, yeah.
This
This guy here, yeah.
He decides, I've always liked that real estate.
Yeah,
You took the owner out.
yeah.
And I'm sure you're thinking of motivating the owner of that box too.
I was, but he wanted it.
He took it.
Yeah.
He stayed. Now what happened? Did you let both of them fight about it a little bit too?
No, I took the other cock away. So then I brought the other cock back, and he went back in there, but he was landing here, and he knew he was in there. So he's flying from there to there, and then he take off all the way down the loft, that height off the floor, all the way. Land and come all the way back up again.
Now how many pigeons did he beat?
I think it was 4,000 odd.
4,000 pigeons.
Yeah. That's what he done.
And you got a little bit of
Bit of dough.
coin out of it
I did.
by being observant.
I did, yeah.
A nice story. Bet €5, take home 300 just by paying attention. Having great pigeons obviously helps too. They buy about 4 to 6 young birds a year from a top fancier and fly them. The good ones then get one chance in the breeding loft. No results with your 2 rounds of youngsters, and you are excused.
If we buy in pigeons, we'll try them out in there for 1 year. And then if they don't, we'll put them into our own best.
So a pigeon that you buy with a great pedigree, or
Yeah.
or whatever you think is.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you look at the pigeon or the performance or the pedigree or.
I look at the pigeon, the pedigree, I couldn't list off pedigrees to you.
Good for you.
I have them inside there because in case you wanted to look at them, I couldn't tell you.
No, that's all
I
right.
just know.
If you don't know, I don't need to know.
I just know the strain they are. I couldn't list
This
off.
piece of paper cost me £1,000.
Yeah, I couldn't
this
say.
Piece of paper cost me 100.
That's a granddaughter of this or a grandson
right.
of that. I couldn't tell you all that. I'd have to look at the pedigree because I'm not interested in it.
Young Eric devotes most of his time to the young bird team. He may be a quiet guy, but his birds do a lot of talking. The Kennedys have won more than half of their young bird club races for many years running. We let the youngsters out to fly, and I tried to get a customer for a peanut.
You got a peanut. They really love that.
Yeah, I'm only feeding them about 2 weeks.
And while I hate to end a story of such great fanciers on a sour note, I think it's important to include the observations of this veteran fancier on a subject I heard repeatedly here on the Emerald Isle. That is how the growth of raptors is changing the way they raise and train their birds, and the very future of his hobby.
These birds, most of these birds were born and banded when?
End of January, February.
End of January.
Yeah.
So you're not doing any, you're not getting that extra month, you're not
No.
banding them January 1st?
No. There's
Why
a
not?
need because of the hawks. If
You
we've
can't
done
get
it,
them out in time.
that's it. We've done it, we've paired up before Christmas. We had plenty of youngsters here and the hawk was taking them off the loft. So we said we wouldn't go through that again, so we paired them later now. We give it a month later.
And the hawks migrate, and there aren't as many for a while.
There aren't as many. They come around April time, the end of March, the first week in April. And then they actually start coming back hitting now. This is for the last 2 weeks and this week. And then it'll lull off again till July.
Once the hen gets hooked in,
It's the hen is the problem.
everybody's
Yeah. So that's the reason we don't do that.
hoping and praying.
So your whole regimen, your planning, it used to be the thing that dedicated was whether you could get bands or not, and get it on try and get a New Year's Day band on an 8-day-old foot.
Yeah, no, we don't do that.
No, because of the raptors.
That's it.
That's amazing, and that's Eric. You've seen that change in what span of time?
With the early...
How bad it's gotten with them?
Oh, this year it's absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
This year is the worst year I'm racing pigeons 38 years and I've never seen that like this year. It's absolutely horrendous this year. Something will have to be done. There's nothing surer than that. We won't have a pigeon left.
Eric Kennedy and Eric Jr., Kilcool. Who we visit on these trips depends a great deal on local feedback, but occasionally a name that registers locally is also on the radar of some of my friends in other countries. That was the case of this destination, the home and lofts of Derek Cummins. This was a stop Frank Tasker was adamant I make, and with Frank, I've learned to do what I'm told. Like Pat Byrne, Derek lives in a row house with a back garden jammed with pigeon lofts. His friend Patty Levy was visiting, and we all had coffee and a chat. At 52, Derek's been racing over 30 years, since he and other boys in the neighborhood tamed and trained street pigeons and ran to a corner pole with the first feral home from a few-mile race. An electrician by trade, he was no overnight success in the racing game.
I had to make a lot of phone calls. I had to ring the likes of Frank Tasker, and I rang a lot of people. I'd be asking loads of questions. It took me, I'd say before I won a race, it was probably 10 years. You know what I mean? I used to race natural pigeons, and sure, it was a waste of time. And the first time I went on widowhood racing, I won, because I had to read about it and find out about it. And the first time I raced, my first particular race on widowhood, I won it. I mean, after all them years, you know what I mean? I raced.
That'll make you a believer.
Yeah.
Since that first win, Derek has captured the South Road Federation Championship twice and won 10 nationals, both inland and across the channel. He explained why the birdage in local competition has now climbed over 10,000 birds.
Now, as I say, in the last couple of weeks, we've had 14,000 pigeons in our federation, which what happened to is they brought in a 50 bird limit. So to say there'd be 10 guys sending 100. So the 600 people that are in the federation can send 50 now, because you have 50, I have 50, he has 50, and he has 50. So they feel equal now. So what is the fella who had only kept 20 or 30 youngsters, he has gone up to keeping 50 now, because Joe Blob down the road is sending 50, I'm going to send 50. So that means we've multiplied into 14 and 15,000 worth of pigeons per week then, you know what I mean?
The key word I wrote for Derek is change. He is a slave to no system or family of birds.
I wouldn't say I have a base family. I'm a devil for change in my family. You know, I had winning pigeons, and then I always try and get better winning pigeons. You know, I'm not one for, I don't have the same pigeons 20 years. You know, if a new pigeon comes on the market, I try and get them, you know.
I enjoyed his comments on why some of Dublin's champions are not retired, but working men.
You know, if I'm here all day, you're going to annoy them. And I mean, I've often come in at 5 o'clock, I got stuck on the M50. We have to be in the club by 6:30. I might here get at 5:30. Just go out, push them all into a basket, go down, and I win. You know, and I've often been here at 2 o'clock,
go out and show the hen, take the hen out, torment, might train the cock, come back, and I'd be last. You know what I mean? So there's like, to me,
winning system.
Yeah,
Get a
yeah,
job.
get a job, and then you come home.
And when I told him the theme of this film, he had a perfect story about finding stars where you least expect it.
What happened was I was working with these 4 guys, and the boss man wanted to go to Belgium. He'd bought pigeons. So we went to this place, and he'd wings and all sorts of things. A trophy room, this size, you know. So I couldn't buy any pigeons because I was only being with the guys. So we come out then, we got into our van, we had a hired van and a fella who spoke Belgium, and he would bring us. So we come out of this estate, and there was pigeons flying around. I said to him, man, can we go in there and have a look at them? Oh, he said, I'll go in and ask the man, can you go in? So we go in, and this young lad comes down. He said, where have you been down there all? Oh, I'm better than him, he said. Like, and he takes out the sheet, and he says, look, there, I'm first, he was third or fourth. And how much are they? They were €25. So we'll pay you now. We give him £100 each, and he sent the pigeons next year. You know, we paid him our money, and he said, that's grand. He had our money, and he sent them next year. And the pigeon, I got 4 pigeons. We drew out of piece of paper. We put all the ring numbers in. We took the ring cards out. So I got 4 pigeons. So one pigeon then, it wins an open, which is, to win an open in Ireland is he wins an open. He wins £2,500. The next week I send him, he wins £2,500 again in a channel race. And he wins the Fed. And then he flows Sennin Cove, I think, 3 times, and he's well up. And then he flows France 300 odd miles, you know what I mean? Like for €25, you know, so.
We proceeded outside where lofts occupy every square inch of space. On the far right's a small loft Derek used for his first effort with roundabout hens. The main widowhood loft adjoins it, and at the far end is his young bird loft. Stock birds and more young birds go into the lofts on the left. The main widowhood loft, or I guess I should call it the roundabout cock section, is bright and well ventilated with transparent sheeting facing due east. He's incorporated a chimney system with the pipes terminating in the attic. Also, he's added plastic pipe at the floor level in front of the nest to achieve a controlled airflow.
So that's a little bit of air in front of the box.
Yeah, it just rises up here.
It heats up.
Yeah, and then
this is solid.
Yeah, I've made this on a slant to try and go out there, you know. And I kept the pigeons immaculate. It did improve the condition of the pigeons.
He keeps absorbent straw under the wooden grate floor.
Pressure.
He says he's tried most new ideas, but tries not to believe there's only one way.
So what we're looking at here is you've dialed this in a little more.
Yeah. I've changed it from that side.
So, but you've got birds racing as well over there. As you have
Yes,
here?
yeah.
Now that'll drive you crazy.
Yeah, that's what does drive you crazy with racing pigeons, because, you know, to me there's nobody can tell you to go buy a pigeon loft and you're going to win. You know, no matter what they say. I mean, every loft is different. You know, I mean, all the top fellas, Frank's is different. Like, you listen to Frank, you'd never sleep at night worrying about it. You know what I mean? You know, everything is, look, I'm simple. I can change. Like fellas say, why did you change again?
I don't think Mr. Tasker really wants to have people have sleepless nights. He just wants them to win, right?
That's it, yeah.
I asked about an odd light bulb, and he explained it's an ionizer.
And it's an ionizer that you'd use where?
For asthmatics, you know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't think they even make them in that size anymore, you know? But
it just comes
has
off?
a little
Can you show
needle.
how it comes off?
Yeah, just plugs out like a bulb. It's like a bulb, and it just has a little needle. I've never changed it, and that's what gathers.
Wow.
You know, there's a little light in it, just indicates that it's on. No, I clean it every so often, but that's what it gathers, you know.
He's had it for years. If you beat Derek Cummins, he certainly takes notice. A pair of young new members have definitely got his attention, and he's getting serious about roundabout hens.
There's 2 young lads come into our club, they're only starting, and next minute the hens are beating my cocks, you know, and like, you're saying, wow, I mean, and then you go back next week and he's beating you again, but when you go back the 3rd time and he's still beating you, and then you go back the 4th time and he's still beating you, and you say, we're going to have to get hens out there, you know. And all they do is train them. They train them, they bring them back, they train them, and they come back. So there seems to be very simple work with a hen.
We went next to the combination Youngbird stock loft. For a fancier who's won 8 open races here, this was not his top season. A virus with his first round of youngsters led him to eliminate them all, and work with his second round only. But this is not a fancier to ever stay down for long. Cummins is a master at seeing someone pull ahead and then catching up and passing them. I thought this loft was a clever design. The outside aviary is accessible from the two Youngbird sections. This allows him to shuffle young cocks or hens into the aviary easily. The two sections can be closed off from one another, and the youngsters allowed to walk through a small door from one to the other before they go to a race. Also, the small stock bird section adjoins the young birds, much like the Priest Brothers arrangement. This gives Derek the opportunity to separate youngsters by sex in the main section, and then later in the race schedule, let them into the stock loft section to race to the nest. He's had top Youngbird prizes in the Fed with this layout over the years. Oh, and for a little bit of extra motivation, he put some of his top Youngbird prizes on the wall so the youngsters know what's expected of them. We then took a look at the other stock section, where he showed us the €25 cockbird he'd told us about earlier. Where most fanciers would have retired the pigeon after the first big win, Cummins wouldn't think of it. He'd only put the bird to stock because of friends nagging him.
Very, very clever, you know. The fellas say you should have 20 of them, but I don't, because I want to race them, you know.
But now you've
Finally.
grudgingly.
Yes, grudgingly, yeah.
After he's won again and again and again.
Yeah.
And finally, as we were saying goodbye, Derek had a chance to show us the car-top training baskets he uses. He trains his youngsters daily up to 30 miles, often twice if he feels they need it. This system lets him do it with a passenger car. So, with this bird's eye view as our final scene, I'll predict Cummins' hens will soon be joining his cockbirds in the winner's circle here at Dublin. Derek is one of those fanciers that just gets better as the competition gets tougher. Derek Cummins, Dublin. Remember that first time I asked the Brennans for the names of the best Irish flyers? And they told me only one name popped into their heads? The name O'Mara. Here in Dublin pigeon circles, that means this pair, 71-year-old Bill on the left and son Jerry, 40, on the right. Over 2 days, we visited their individual pigeon lofts and talked about their methods. Bill has a tidy white loft in the same back garden where Jerry first learned to race, and Jerry now has his own home and small back garden operation too. As you'll hear, the amount of winning that's been going on in these locations is exceptional. But how they got here is a far different story from so many of the ones we've heard in this film. Of our friends in Germany, Belgium, and Wales, 9 out of 10 learned pigeon racing from their father. That deep knowledge is a big advantage over newcomers to the hobby, so you'd expect this story to be that good old Bill O'Mara somehow enticed his sons into carrying the torch for the family's winning pigeon tradition. That story would be a total fake, and it would be a fraction of the fascinating saga of how the O'Mara name came to dominate the skies of Dublin. It begins back in '82, when 12-year-old Jerry and older brother Andrew talked their mom into letting them keep a pigeon they claimed they'd found, but actually bought from a neighbor. Typical kid stuff, right? Then they slapped together a tiny loft on the wall of their garage. You can see it in the upper right-hand corner, this photo. A year later, another, slightly bigger, and then another you could actually stand inside in 1983. Father Bill doesn't know much about this. Why? He's a long-haul lorry driver, one of the very first to truck Irish beef to American bases on the continent. So while Bill was often away, he did buy the kids 6 birds for starters, and lo and behold, they won their first Youngbird race. Remember, this is probably before Jerry's voice changed. By '85, they won the then Dublin Fed Averages Trophy, and by 1986, the teenagers took home a table full of victories. Now, if that wasn't bad enough for the proud Dublin fanciers to be beaten by kids, Bill O'Mara was about to make it much worse. When he realized how good his sons were and that the fountainhead of pigeon racing was in Belgium, he said, "Let's go." So in 1986, 16-year-old phenom Jerry O'Mara is being schooled by the likes of Belgian Youngbird master Maurice Verhey, the already legendary Silver Toya, and many more. This educational continental trip was repeated again in 1994, where Jerry first heard about darkening. Now married, he bought a home and built the first of these lofts. By 1999, with a small team of darkened youngsters, he won 9 straight races.
14.
These simple green buildings, actually commercial garden sheds he tweaked for racing, have been the scene of a trophy heist the likes of Dublin has never seen in its long racing history. In a decade, Jerry was overall South Road champ 5 times and second place twice. He scored 28 Fed and Open victories from here. At 40, this puts him on a pace to equal or exceed the North's legendary Ronnie Williamson's performance. I pieced together this history in a series of conversations with Bill, Andrew, and friends in Bill's kitchen, in Jerry's backyard, and with Bill and Jerry in the tiny stock loft they share in Bill's garage. Incredibly, the 2 trips to Belgium involved no bird purchases. Jerry says they were so naive they didn't even think of it. Their earliest victories came when Bill visited the Luella pigeon stud and bought the wrong pigeons.
That story, you were told to buy 2 different breeds at Luella.
At Luella.
They didn't have it.
Didn't have it.
But
no.
they said, oh, by the way,
Try this.
try these. That's the foundation of this
That's
lot.
right. When I brought the 6 home, we actually raced them 6. Little did we know, we didn't know anything about them.
But put it this way, the 6 that we got in 83, I would like to get the same 6 now, because we won with them when we didn't even know how to fly pigeons.
Didn't even have to fly pigeons.
And we didn't even know, when we knew what we were doing, but we didn't know what we were doing.
But we went,
No matter where they found pigeons, Jerry made them work. So what's his favorite source? Belgium? Nope. Holland? Mm-mm. How about English coal country in the mighty Up North Combine? Jerry describes visiting Alan Hindhoff to buy birds for 50 pounds apiece.
Like if he went into a stock lot and was handing them out, and I didn't know. I thought he was.
told you to hand them out.
We wanted him to buy pigeons. He went into a stock lot and he was handing pigeons out. I kept saying, are these for sale or is it just to...
Whose loft is this?
It's Alan Hindhoff and Donaldson
Hindhoff.
he raced under. Won the Up North Combine and bred and something.
He's a legend, like, you know.
Oh, he was real, and he was a complete legend up there, like. And he was handing these out, and I didn't know whether they were for sale, so I was just putting them into a basket, but he wasn't asking for them back in. So another one come out, and if he didn't like, put it back in, right, put it into the basket. I thought when he come out, he was going to say, no, they're not the ones, but he said, no. I said, well, take them. He says, right, no problem, and that was it. And he says, well, these will win for you.
How many pigeons did you come back with?
Cool.
10.
We nearly died. We were saying, oh, get out of here quick before. But you see,
thought he'd change his mind?
He always
He
said...
walked out. He walked out of the garden. He didn't know we were going to even get charged for one. I said, no, will you go? I said, we want these pigeons.
We went up and
best
set
thing we ever done.
That's it. I set up to...
Now, we
How
got
much did he
these
charge you?
£50 each, I think.
50
£50
yeah.
for
Yeah.
10 birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're a big part of what's here.
Oh, yeah. They were there.
At least you get the impression that this is a tale of lucky pigeon buying. Don't. Jerry once flew to Belgium for a one-day visit, picked a pair of pigeons, mated them, and raised the best young bird in all of Dublin the following year. The stock section is managed by Bill, and he gets the first round of youngsters, Jerry the second. Their race teams are simply foster parents for the eggs from the birds in here. The stock birds are a blend of fed winners, the rare and tested outcross, and the occasional unflown youngster that catches Jerry's eye. He doesn't run any pedigree software other than the computer-like recall he has in his head for every bird his dad cares for here. We visited both Jerry's and Bill's. They live far enough apart to fly in separate clubs. It was Keith who first took us to Jerry's. They're good friends, in part because they both drive taxi cabs in addition to racing pigeons. Looking at the small green buildings Jerry races from, it's a little hard to imagine the magnitude of what he's done against contests where he's sent a few pigeons against 10,000 or more. But this is it. One section for cocks, another for widowhood hens in the middle, and a young bird section on the left. The connected sheds are 6 feet deep and were added over the years beginning in '97. He planted the neighbor-friendly hedge then, too. There's a large adjustable vent on the end of the widowhood cock section, and the main sliding door has a trap built in. Inside the cock section there are 21 nests, including 3 tiny ones sandwiched in. He never takes out his bowls, simply sliding off the wood and feed cup if he wants to motivate the cocks. A lot of attention is paid to ventilation here. The doors are vented, and Jerry can adjust the airflow up through the roof vent. Fancy? No. Functional? Yes. I'd say the same for his small traps, which Bill constructed. The landing board flips down, and he puts a small piece of wood to encourage birds to trap quickly. 1 or 2 seconds matter when 10,000 pigeons are pouring into a circle about 6 miles across. The small trap and door on the left lead to the widowhood hen section. Jerry uses green shade cloth for air control when the door is open. The hens have small boxes, and he can lock them in with slated doors if he wants. I call them widowhood hens because the hens exercise daily and trap back into this section. He seldom opens the small door or this large sliding door into the nest section. The hens learn that any time they go into the basket, either for training or to race, they get to trap back into the nesting section. But there's really no roundabout going on. Finally, welcome to the winningest young bird loft in Dublin. It's a deceptively simple layout. 2 small aviaries bracket the entrance door. The far one opens into the main young bird section, where the single round of youngsters are darkened. The other small aviary is in an open perching area, where birds can be during the day, and this section permits a lot more airflow through wire netting. And finally, there's a tiny end section for a few late breds he wants to settle. It doesn't get much simpler or smaller than this, and it occurred to me to ask how the young birds come in and out.
I design it and he builds it.
You designed it.
And he builds it.
God, this is great. It's about as simple as you can get. This thing
You
here.
see, no one's ever here, you know what I mean? It's just
that just slides in and it torques it up.
So standing here at the site of dozens of fed wins, I wish I could say I extracted secret after secret from this young Irish master. I had a day and a night, 2 days to try. But in terms of unearthing a unique system here, it was not to be. Jerry O'Mara may be an incredible champion, but he's several other things. Humble and curious. He doesn't boast or bore you with results, and he asked me almost as many questions as I asked him. You've seen the humble building the winners come home to, and I wish I could give you the inside scoop on Jerry's road to success, but by his own admission, there is not much of a map for that road. Take what he looks for to know if his birds are right.
What do you look for when you're seeing how you're doing? In the hand, you pick them up, or you?
I do, but it's like every year I hear so many theories about trout and all this, so I don't even look at it now anymore. But people, better pigeon men than me, swear by it. So.
But you also mostly are you mostly just observing their behavior?
Just watching. Just making sure they're right.
How active they are?
Yeah. Best thing was when you fly well in the Federation and you see how good they are, then you know in your head what they're supposed to be like every year. And that's probably a benefit, but if you've never been to top line with the Fed with them, then you don't really know. So when you know what they should be like, that's why I've seen that they could be all over the place happy and people say, oh, they're grand. I say, no, they're just, you know.
So once you've won, you just remember what they looked like when they won. Got that? Or how about the feeding he does and how he decides when to add or subtract grains for his race team, old or young?
I couldn't write down and give you a system what I do because I don't know what I do. I just watch them myself.
And you've been doing it that way year after year while you've been racking up these results. In other words, the system that you had 5 years before may be slightly different than...
I've changed the feed. You go to Blackpool or anywhere else and you'd see a different grain, so you buy a bag of that and you might do a couple of handfuls of that, and it wouldn't be one set, you know. But I like the challenge of it as well. As I say, it's like in football or in snooker, they all know the next shot, so if you can feed them and then you know what the pigeon should be like the next day.
And with the darkened second-round youngsters that make up his race team, he keeps seeing new approaches that work.
What will you be doing with these young birds as you're getting ready for the season? You got cocks and hens?
Yeah, I had them before, I've done them before. I started off, they were all together, and they topped the fed. I separated them, and they won and topped the fed. And then I put them back together, and they won and topped the fed. So now I just leave them. I've done it all. I used to have hens and cocks, and the hens were actually in here, and the cocks were in there, and the hens flew well, and these had this open. And the hen nearly won the young bird averages on their own.
And this is really open. This is like an old English open front loft, because this is open all the way down to the ground. That's virtually 80% open side.
I mean, these are only just out the dark now, so like racing now will be in another month. So you would only be getting going now with these.
So you used to separate them. Yeah. Cocks in here, hens in here. They'd get together just before you shipped them.
Yeah.
Now they stay together. So as they mature, some of them are starting to mate up. I see they're starting to pair up in here.
I prefer them like that, just sitting like that. When you've had them on eggs, you seem to lose them or something. Where I prefer it when they're just happy. You could go in now and you see them like that. And then I've seen it through the race and see them like that, and they go in then and she'd be over there and he'd be there. And they just like really each other when they want. When they've been on eggs, some fellas win with them, but I don't always seem to sort of lose them, or they never do as well. I prefer just to have them sitting like that happy on a perch.
An article I read about Jerry put it well. His secret weapons are on either side of his head, his ears. Jerry's insatiable curiosity and quiet nature hide a mind that is a sponge for good ideas. In a group of pigeon men, he's the least likely to be doing all the talking. In fact, his constant questions have made less successful fanciers think he was insulting them.
As I say, I'm forever reading on the internet and books, any latest books, doesn't matter, the latest DVDs, we get the whole lot, like, you know, it's, we don't, you're forever, like, you're watching DVDs and you're, you know, it's just what you do. I've always done it, like, you know, I've talked to everybody, like, I've talked to people. I talked to a fellow one time, he was a good flyer, and he actually thought I was winding up, because when I went, he was asking my friend, he thought I was winding up because the man told me how well I flew, and he thought I was on. I said, no, I says, I'm talking to any good pigeon man. I said, they always learn.
And for as much as he reads and watches DVDs, including those by yours truly, the more he realizes his own findings don't always tally with the opinions of other legends in the sport.
What annoys me is when I watch the DVDs and you see the top pigeon men saying stuff, and you say, no, like, I don't find that, and yet they're better than what I am.
You mean our DVDs? Mine?
Yeah, you know, like, say, the fella saying with fat mixtures and all that, like, say, no, listen to the, like, not saying Shellackins are probably one of the best pigeon men in the world, but he's saying stuff and saying feeding all year round, where I don't. Like, I'm changing the feed all the time. And
So, a young man with one of the strongest early careers of any pigeon racer on earth has more questions than he can find answers to. I hope all of you stuck in a pigeon club where the worst flyer is an advice-spewing blowhard appreciate that. Later I had a chance to visit Bill's again, and he has a simple explanation for how Jerry wins.
He's gifted. If he was playing football, he'd be a fantastic footballer. He'd be a Pele of this world. If he was a racing jockey, he'd be Lester Pickett.
What's ironic is that if Bill wasn't winning with his own pigeons, he could take a job full-time being Jerry's public relations man. I don't think I've ever met a prouder father. Jerry keeps no trophies. He literally doesn't seem to care. But Bill peels the winning plates off the big ones, gives away the trophies, and sticks the victories on all sides of the smaller trophies in his little conservatory. But part of that is not just paternal pride, but a trait of the warm and sentimental nature of the Irish. For example, in Bill's loft, where he too has more than his share of Federation victories, there's a picture on the wall. Not out there for the public, just here for Bill. It's of Alan Hindhoff, a friend. Alan, the generous source of much of the blood that is winning here, and a daily reminder that most of us owe, wherever we've gotten to in this sport, to others who've come before us and helped us. Now with this fellow, I may have to amend that a little. He had no family history in pigeons. He somehow picked pigeons time after time that turned into winners. He can barely explain how. Once in a while, you come across one of those rare cases where man and bird are born on the same wavelength. And in our sport, we call the human being a natural. Jerry and Bill O'Mara, Dublin. Well, there you have it. 4 countries and a plethora of great pigeon racers that we visited. I hope you've heard some old ideas, some new ideas, things that will help you in the years ahead. And hey, I'm not the only one that can go to these foreign countries and make these friends and see all these great birds. You too could rent a sexy car in any country, and most of all, make sure you borrow a sat-nav from a friend. Then nothing can go wrong. Thanks for watching.
Turn right.
Why?
Enter roundabout.
Enter
roundabout.
I'm in the...
Take second exit.
I'm in...
Enter roundabout.
I'm in the...
Take second.
Don't interrupt me! I'm in the roundabout. Which exit? Martha, talk to me. Hello? Come on. Which exit? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you. I apologize.
Recalculating.
Which
exit left.
Which left? This left?
Exit left. Recalculating. Recalculating.
Martha!
Recalculating. Recalculating.
Why does this say Poland?
Well, as you can see, I finally made it in one piece back to Montana. I boldly took an exit and eventually found my way to the airport. And all kidding aside, I want to end with a few words about today's pigeon world and one aspect of this film series. The majority of fanciers in our 6th program didn't know who I was until I asked if we could visit. Some may be a little harder than others to get in to see, but really, most were glad to have a foreign visitor, camera or no. So I'm letting you in on the greatest secret of all among the legendary champions featured in the earliest episodes of this series. At one time, they too were bold explorers. Please remember that. Don't just gaze at the stars that the commercial pigeon world wants you to see. You too can make friends and find magic in these remote corners of the racing world. Our pigeon universe is not only expanding, but international relationships are improving dramatically. The internet is helping us make friends anywhere we want to explore. You may enjoy looking over my shoulder as we get lost in the countryside, but I urge you to think seriously about your own exploration. As I said earlier, it is that exploration and search for new blood that forms the foundation of all the champions we admire today. So on behalf of those champions, I invite you too to boldly go where no one in your club, your federation, or maybe even your nation has gone before. I'm Jim Jenner. Thanks for watching. There wouldn't be a Secrets of Champions film series if it weren't for my friend Frank Tasker. As he helped me make Marathon in the Sky, then Oldest Feathered Friend, and traveled with me to China during the production of Share the Blue Sky, Frank always prodded me to think outside the documentary realm. He wanted me to apply my skills to create films that would capture the thoughts and methods of great pigeon racers who had no commercial axe to grind. He promised he'd share his timeless wisdom like the secret of the throat and would help me recruit other fanciers respected for their race results and their refreshing honesty. Frank lived to see that dream come true. His participation in the first 4 films in this series helped thousands of pigeon fanciers around the world to come to know him not only as one of our hobby's most brilliant men, but also think of him
years before, and he, because he got that, I got interested looking at the pictures, and one day I was out getting the rabbit food, and lo and behold, there's a pigeon. And I went running all the way home, and he came with some wheat, and he was very clever. He could catch a pigeon anywhere. He used to call what he had in his hand, the wheat and hemp. He used to call it Isla Tyson. That was a special formula, he said. He said that made them win races and you could catch them easily. Of course, I know today now that with hemp seed or peanuts you can catch pigeons easily. And that was my first introduction. Anyway, he caught the pigeon. We took it home to my house and put it in a box, sort of rabbit hutch type thing, in the garden. And the next day I let it out thinking it would stay, and it went, and I was so upset. He got me a pair of pigeons from one of the local fanciers, and that started me off.
That was where, Frank?
At Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire.
And what happened with that first pair of pigeons?
The first pair of pigeons, it was a grizzle cock of 1951 and a red checker